contributions from the floor. I think I'm going to propose that after Jean, then we have Anand, then we close for lunch, if that's agreeable, unless if there are burning contributions for the two other reports. Okay, so Jean, then we have Anand. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, dear delegates, for all the comments we have received. I would like to intervene on 3 points. The first one is related to your question, Honorable Chair, about the opportunities, how we are reaping them and harnessing them, based on the experience of Central Africa. For us, the opportunity to reap the opportunities, we have been mobilizing strategic partnership. Because when it comes to industrialization and economic diversification, our countries needed strategies. And we have helped some of them, from Chad to Congo, Brazzaville, and others, developing their industrialization and economic diversification strategies. Beyond the national level, now we are moving at the sub-regional level, helping Central Africa to have its sub-regional economic and industrialization and economic diversification strategy. Beyond the strategy, building up a partnership toward implementing them through special economic zone has been our motto actually in Central Africa, and trying to actually address this constraint in terms of financing. We've been able to come up with financial institutions such as Flexi Bank, ADEA, which is here, the African Development Bank, and others, to try and advance the agenda on special economic zones in some of the countries. We have been talking about the battery initiatives between the DRC and Zambia, now opening up to Morocco and Zimbabwe, making a call to join us. I think it's an opportunity to have a real regional value chain well integrated, where we can make sure we move from opportunity to real investment. The second point I would like to dwell on, Honorable Chair, is related to what we are doing on natural capital accounting and this ambition to rebase the GDPs. We started in Central Africa by training all our countries, trying to help them understand the benefit of actually embracing this new concept of natural capital accounting. From our last ICE meeting in Brazzaville, all the countries were, the awareness was built. And then from that one, we had the piloting cases in Gabon and Cameroon, where with the support of UNDP and also through the National Institute of Statistics and other bodies at national level, we've been able to introduce them not only on the tools and method of rebasing of natural capital accounting, but also how this can be used in terms of basing the GDP and then bring it to the debate on financing and expanding the GDP of the country. We need actually to expand this. We have started the work in Cameroon, strengthening the capacity of the country to have its own plan for environment statistics. In most of our countries, the national accounts are very strong and well developed. But when it goes to environment statistics and social statistics, you have issues. So we have helped Cameroon develop this first stage, and then we move in terms of trying to capture the contribution of the natural capital to GDP, and then launch this debate on the link with financing. A very last one, Honorable Chair, is related to the role of research and research development in advancing our debate on special economic zones. And this is a question by the DRC. Dans nos efforts de développer la zone économique spéciale de batterie et véhicules électriques en RDC, la CEA et ses partenaires ont pu développer le centre d'excellence sur les batteries qui est logé à l'université de Lubumbashi, qui est un partenariat interuniversitaire qui mobilise non seulement les universités congolaises, zambiennes, mais aussi une université allemande. Et l'espace s'ouvre de plus en plus. Après notre réunion à Rabat sur les e-mobility, les universitaires marocains veulent aussi rejoindre l'initiative. Au-delà de la question de financement public de la recherche, je crois qu'il y a une opportunité ici d'embrasser les opportunités de financement par l'industrie à travers le renforcement des liens entre l'entreprise et les industries qui sont dans les zones économiques spéciales. Je crois que c'est un cas pilote intéressant qui devrait bien en inspirer d'autres. This is what I wanted to share.
Thank you. Let's have Robert. Then quickly, please, if we could wrap up.
Yes.
And then we have Hanan, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to comment on a couple of things. We want to build on the capacity issue on science and technology on the continent. I think that the key here lies in partnerships, partnership with specialized institutions. For instance, ECA is beginning to partner with the African Academy of Sciences to see how can we scale up capacity of scientists on the continent, right from the university level. I think we also started to talk with the Air Navigation Services Authority in South Africa, for instance. How do you build the capacity of Africa in sophisticated technology like air navigation and routing? And we're also even discussing how do you manufacture these kinds of equipment on the continent. I think we are also partnering, for instance, with the Human and Social Research Council of South Africa to build the capacity of young graduates in new emerging sophisticated areas like green hydrogen, and also with the Commission of Science and Industrial Research in South Africa. So I think the key really is for all of these institutions that are involved in scientific development to work together. And very quickly, Chair, on energy. I think the issue of INGA has been raised. INGA is a flagship project of Agenda 2063. INGA is a project of the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa. INGA is a project that seems to have all the ingredients to be developed. I think feasibility studies have been done and redone. Financial institutions have indicated interest. Investors have indicated interest, and a couple of years actually ECA worked with the AU High Representative for Infrastructure at the time, Raila Odinga, to organize a high-level meeting in DRC where the heads of state, President Tshisekedi, actually attended online. And so the question really is, what is the challenge? I think it is identified to sit down and identify DRC officials, what is the challenge when everything that is required to implement a project seems to be there. So it seems one have to really identify what is the constraint to move forward on this. And lastly, with ADB, because the chair mentioned what we are doing with them. I think a big challenge in infrastructure development in Africa is to move through the different stages of the development cycle, from concept to feasibility studies to implementation. A lot of projects are stuck at the early concept stage, and that's why, in addition to being part of the BIDA steering committee together with AU and African Development Bank, we're now working with African Development Bank to see how they can provide advisory transaction services to move this project forward. I think that would be an important step, because if countries says these are our priority projects, and ADB is coming to say, okay, we can provide technical transaction advisory services, I think that could be critical in moving the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanan. Then we have an outstanding online contribution from Morocco, now. Are they still online? So let's take them quickly, then she closes.
Yes,
After
I
that,
am. Bonjour. Est-ce que vous me recevez?
yes, we can hear you clearly.
D'accord. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Mesdames et Messieurs, honorables assistances, bonjour. Bonjour tout le monde. Intervenant pour la première fois, permettez-moi tout d'abord de féliciter le Zimbabwe pour l'organisation réussie de cette édition de CAM 2024 et pour la présidence aussi. J'ai suivi avec beaucoup d'intérêt les différentes présentations tout au long de cette session et les sessions précédentes. Ce sont des présentations qui ont mis en lumière les initiatives, une panoplie d'initiatives et de réalisations de la CEA. Et je remercie vivement la CEA qui ne cesse de donner l'aide aux pays membres pour accélérer la transition des économies et leur croissance inclusive. Dans ce contexte et dans le cadre de la collaboration avec les agences onusiennes, moi, je n'ai pas de commentaires précis, mais j'aimerais bien, si vous le permettez, partager l'expérience ou bien quelques aspects de l'expérience marocaine en matière de la transition verte et inclusive, en vous assurant que le Royaume marocain s'inscrit pleinement dans le cadre de la transition verte et inclusive. Il s'agit pour le Maroc d'un projet de société porté par Sa Majesté le roi Mohamed VI et connaissant un fort engagement institutionnel. Ce chantier, désormais au cœur des politiques publiques nationales et territoriales, a été initié dès le début des années 2000 à travers l'adoption de la loi 11.003 relative à la protection et la mise en valeur de l'environnement, renforcée ensuite par la Constitution de 2011 qui consacre le droit de développement durable, mais surtout matérialisée par l'adoption de plusieurs stratégies, à leur tête la stratégie nationale de développement durable visant à accélérer la transition vers une économie verte et inclusive d'ici 2030. Et aussi, on note aussi la stratégie énergétique 2030, la stratégie bas carbone à l'horizon 2050. Et je note également que le Maroc a mis en place un nouveau modèle de développement et parmi les principales priorités qui sont au centre du nouveau modèle de développement, c'est la préservation de l'environnement. Qui dit la préservation de l'environnement dit la protection et la valorisation des ressources naturelles, l'eau, les forêts, les littorales, etc., le renforcement de la résilience aux aléas climatiques, la décarbonation de l'économie, la transition énergétique, la mobilité durable, et j'en passe. Donc, le Maroc met en avant la souveraineté hydrique, la souveraineté alimentaire, énergétique, industrielle, et aussi le nouveau modèle de développement positionne le Maroc à l'international, mais surtout l'intégration dans l'Afrique. Elle met en avant l'intégration du Maroc et de la politique marocaine en Afrique. Bref, pour ne pas s'attarder, je vais exposer quelques points ou bien quelques initiatives entamées par le Maroc pour le verdissement des secteurs économiques du pays. Premièrement, le verdissement de la commande publique. Et là, on parle de l'exemplarité de l'État, car l'État peut jouer un rôle crucial dans l'accompagnement de cette transition, dans l'accompagnement de l'industrie, en promouvant également les recherches et développements, en créant un climat favorable et propice pour cette transition et en créant une demande marocaine pérenne, en particulier en renforçant les petites et moyennes entreprises et les petites entreprises et l'intégration du secteur informel. Un autre chantier, c'est la décarbonation de l'industrie qui constitue un enjeu de taille pour le Maroc, un enjeu de taille pour une transition accélérée vers la production sobre en carbone par l'accès à l'électricité produite à partir de ressources renouvelables à des prix compétitifs, par l'amélioration de l'efficacité énergétique. L'industrie marocaine aussi est appelée à contribuer pour la préservation des ressources hydriques par la rationalisation de l'utilisation de l'eau et la réutilisation des eaux usées, ainsi que le recours aux nouvelles technologies et les solutions innovantes et nouvelles. Et tout cela à travers plusieurs programmes qui ont été mis en place pour justement pour la décarbonation de l'industrie, et je cite le programme Tatouer Croissance Verte. Un autre chantier ou bien un autre point qui a été largement discuté hier, c'est le point et qui est au cœur de la thématique de cette conférence, qui est le financement. Donc, le Maroc a essayé de mettre en place un cadre financier et une fiscalité favorable à la transition basée sur l'instauration d'outils incitatifs. Sur le plan fiscal, le gouvernement prévoit des chantiers importants portant sur l'étude de la mise en place d'une taxe carbone, la promotion de l'efficacité énergétique à travers l'application d'une TIC sur les équipements énergivores et la mise en place d'une fiscalité douanière plus verte à travers le verdissement du tarif des droits d'importation. Donc, si vous voulez, le financement vert, il s'appuie sur plusieurs piliers. Le financement vert s'appuie, c'est vrai, il s'appuie sur le partenariat international, mais surtout, il faut développer le financement interne, comme il a été discuté hier. Il faut développer le financement interne, principalement à travers l'amélioration des recettes fiscales et surtout la mise en place d'une politique monétaire ciblée et proactive. Et un dernier point pour ne pas prendre beaucoup de temps, c'est le secteur privé. À mon avis, le secteur privé, on devrait miser sur le secteur privé pour cette transition vers l'économie verte et surtout pour la transition énergétique parce qu'il nécessite des fonds énormes et colossaux. Donc, le secteur privé joue un rôle indispensable parce qu'il est un catalyseur des investissements dans le processus de financement et de la transition verte et le financement des projets des énergies renouvelables. Donc, c'était quelques aspects de la transition économique, de la transition vers l'économie verte. Et je dis bien que ce sont des initiatives qui ont été, plusieurs initiatives ont été entamées en collaboration avec la CEA et le Maroc se félicite de la qualité de collaboration avec la CEA et de la coopération entre le Maroc et la CEA et on vous souhaite une bonne continuation dans vos travaux et actions efficaces et ciblées pour le développement de l'Afrique et je vous remercie. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
If we could request, I know Morocco is represented, could we have the presentation for the Secretariat, please? Thank you. Now, lastly, Anand, you
Thank
have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for all the questions and comments that have been already brought up. I think the team already answered many of them. I'd like to focus on 3 issues. So one, the first one is on issue of public expenditure efficiency. I cannot emphasize or highlight this issue more. And to just give you an example, for example, for Africa as a region, Africa spends the highest in terms of percent of GDP on average relative to all other regions. Yet, the spending on that sector is the least efficient among all other regions. So for each dollar spent, we get 56 cents on a dollar. So you can imagine the level of waste that is created in a key issue that would be critical for us on how we will develop if we don't utilize the skills and of the next generations and the youth, and we don't, move forward on this, none of what we are discussing now will actually materialize. So this is just one example of even when we do the right thing, meaning, spend on the right sectors, invest more in education, we're not doing it in the best way we can. There's too much leakages. And this is the type of things that we need to look into. How can we raise the efficiency of what we are spending so that we get the highest returns for each dollar spent? Because we cannot afford otherwise. Another issue, of course, is how do we also reduce the inefficiency, like the issue of energy subsidies. And in many countries, it's not the most vulnerable that actually end up benefiting from energy subsidies. It's usually the high capital intensive industries that are basically getting subsidized at the cost of the most vulnerable. So we need to pay attention to what are we trying to do and is the tool that we're using actually achieving that. Another very important example is the need to review issues of tax expenditure, meaning tax incentives and tax breaks and tax concessions that are supposed to attract investment, but are not, actually delivering to what they're intended. So we need to really have pause and reassess many of these things to actually enable us to create savings that can then be better invested elsewhere. There was also a second issue that was raised, and it was raised by Ghana, is trickling down to a micro level. I think this is a very good point, and it's essential to build awareness overall on what needs to be done. But also, I think there is a lot that is actually being done by the youth and young entrepreneurs that is very impressive. I think one of the things that, I've seen firsthand when we had this event on youth entrepreneurs working on climate action during COP27. It was just really, really inspiring. While we were, as policymakers, as technical and experts discussing things, they were actually getting action done. So what we need to do also is to ensure that we are supporting their innovations, and we are creating enabling environment to allow them to deliver the results for it, and to create platforms for experience sharing. And this is one of the things that ECA is currently working on, to build a platform where these climate entrepreneurs can learn from each other and can provide them support in terms of the know-how. And lastly, Chair, for a point that you raised yourself in terms of credible strategies to underpin opportunities. I think part of what we're trying to do, there were really great presentation on what are the key opportunities. What we're trying to do is to really have a paradigm shift in our development strategy. We need to move from backward looking to forward looking, to develop in a way that takes into account all the trends that are happening, whether it's innovation, technologies, artificial intelligence, the direction that the world is moving into, and capitalizing on our assets. And our assets are definitely, I would say, first, our youth, because we are the youngest continent and only getting younger, where everywhere else is aging. Our natural resources, which we are blessed with, and our actually the higher participation of females, and of course private sector, because the government, with the level of challenges that we are facing, growth is not just going to be created by the state. It needs to be actually, the driver needs to be the private sector. So that's the type of change that we'll need to create to actually move forward. And things like what we've been talking about regarding building green industries around these green minerals is the type of direction that we need to go into, but will not be able to move up that value chain and improve the livelihoods of Africans without actually investing in skilling, education of our youth, and as well as promoting innovation. So these would be kind of the levers that we need to focus on to get it right moving forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you, colleagues up here, for the presentations and for the responses, etc., which I think are very, very comprehensive. Thank you so much. Now, can we break for lunch? And then we have an hour for lunch, if we can come back at 3 o'clock. I've proposed to my colleagues up here that for session 6, we combine session 6 and session 7 when we come back from lunch, and then we have a discussion, and then we can go to the last, the second year, 10-year implementation plan agenda. That we can do after we Bon appetit.
We are delighted that now we finally have the seat for the African Union at the G20, and this is very important because it moves us from being rule takers to rule makers, and leveraging that will be key. But also we need to make sure that Africa is sufficiently represented in terms of voice and quotas in different institutions, including, for example, in the upcoming IMF quota reform, to make sure that Africa has higher shares, which enable higher access to resources and a higher voice or more say in terms of decisions that are taken by these institutions.
Bienvenue, Salibonani, Mangwanani. Very warm welcome to unique and beautiful Victoria Falls.
We treat this as a core country of the continent because of your resilience and the Pan-African spirit.
The primary objective of this conference is to promote the economic and social development of our member states, to foster intra-regional integration and promote international cooperation for Africa's development.
Since our last conference of ministers, the world has fallen deeper into economic fragility, climate change, conflict, and distrust. The continent faces disproportionate burdens and risks arising from climate change-related events and patterns. We must accelerate the adoption of just and sustainable transitions. The issues we face today are particularly acute because the global financial systems are inadequate and have completely failed Africa. In spite of this, we're equally reminded that we have the ability to create our own solutions to our own problems, no matter how small they may be.
It is high time we join hands as a continent and strengthen our existing regional trading blocs, such as the African Continental Free Trade Area, to promote the free movement of goods, services, and people within Africa. I call upon all member states to remove barriers to all entry and exit points so that we create a single market
I think it's good.
and services that promote intra-Africa trade as well as overall industrial development.
Some of the recommendations from here will also be carried as Africa's voice to the UN Secretary General Summit of the Future happening this September, where world leaders will forge a new international consensus on how we deliver a better present and safeguard the future.
On issues of taxation, we have already the UN Tax Convention, and there is a need to also strengthen international cooperation, curb illicit financial flows, and reduce tax evasion and profit sharing. The resources that are lost to illicit financial flows is more than 2.5 times what Africa receives a year in official development assistance. So it's a huge opportunity, and we need to make sure that it's utilized.
Good afternoon, delegates, colleagues. We apologize for the slight delay. There was a slight consultation taking place, so the two deputies are involved in that right now, and they'll be with us very shortly. So please bear with us, and thank you for your understanding. I want Daya to sit here. Daya, can you sit here? Because Said is also making another presentation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The NEPAD one.
The NEPAD one, so sit here.
I did like showing the hologram.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Can we call our meeting to order? We continue with our statutory issues for this afternoon, and we have the following report of the Committee on Social Policy, Poverty and Gender on its 5th session which will be introduced by the Chief of Staff and Acting Director of the Gender, Poverty and Social Policy Division, Sexina. She's going to present for us. And then secondly, progress report on the work of the African Institute of Economic Development and Planning, being introduced by the Director of African Institute of Economic Development Planning, Mr. Is it Ben? Miss Ben Sultane. And then the third one is with two sub presentation, proposed program plan for 2025 and the program performance in 2023, and then summary and proposed program budget for 2025. We will have the proposed program plan introduced by the Director of Strategic Planning, Oversight and Results Division, that's Sadaya Brangate, and then the proposed program budget for 2025 will be by Carlos Haddad. That should take us to the, we are taking the next report, which was supposed to come after coffee. We take all of them at once. Report on United Nations support for African Union and its new Partnership for Africa's Development Program, introduced by the Director of Strategic Planning and Results Division. So we'll do those. And then the last one, which was 5:30 to 6, we are going to do that in the morning. This has not been finalized, so we'll do that first thing in the morning. So we can start with these presentations. Then we can, if the presenters could be concise, please, the main issues, and let's avoid too many elaborations, etc. We need to be concise and to the point. So we'll start with Saxina. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellencies, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to share with you the outcomes of the 5th session of the Committee on Social Policy, Poverty and Gender, and also share some of the areas of focus for the division in the coming year. And just to give you a little background, the division consists of 2 subprograms, subprogram 6 and subprogram 9. Subprogram 6 covers gender equality and women empowerment. Subprogram 9 covers poverty, inequality, and social policy. And we have 3 divisions, 3 sections in the division. One section covers subprogram 6 on gender equality and women's empowerment, and 2 sections cover subprogram 9 on social policy, urbanization, and development. So let me do this. Next. Yeah. So the 5th session of the committee took place last year on November 2nd and 3rd in Addis Ababa. We had 36 member states represented at the committee. We also had representatives from some of our close partners like the African Union Commission, as well as some UN agencies. As you may be aware, the committee serves as an advisory board comprising of experts and policymakers that guide the work of ECA in promoting equitable and inclusive social development in Africa. The committee is led by a bureau, and last year we had the election of the bureau, whereby Ghana was elected as the chair, Djibouti as the vice chair, and South Africa and Tunisia as the first and second rapporteurs. After the election, after the election of the bureau, we had both the sub-programs presented their works in 3 parallel sessions related to the focus of their sections. In addition to presenting the works of the sections, we also had the presentation of the issues paper that was based on the theme of the committee session, which was building new social contracts in Africa, choices to fulfill development aspirations. And after that, we had 3 breakout sessions, which were led by the 3 sections. Next, please. As I just mentioned, that the 3 parallel sessions deliberated on themes related to the areas of focus of the 3 sections. For instance, the gender equality section deliberated on the pathways to enhance the skills of women and girls across Africa. true to its focus on social issues, social policy section investigated the role of education and skills development in reducing poverty. Last but not the least, the urbanization section deliberated on how to enhance towards the agendas 2030 and 2063. So it delved into how to localize the implementation of these agendas. Coming to the theme of the committee session. As we all know, education is crucial to meet Africa's development aspirations by preparing young Africans for the jobs of the future. And political momentum is very apparent around education, as we've just seen with the recently concluded AU summit that deliberated on the topic, Educate an African for the 21st Century, building resilient education systems for increased access to inclusive, lifelong quality and relevant learning in Africa. To present the theme and to have discussions, facilitate discussions, we developed an issues paper that investigated how education can be used as a lever to foster new social contracts and to leave no one behind. The paper identified the strategic drivers and actionable reforms that can help countries develop more effective and efficient education policies and nudge people in order to make correct decisions in their lifetimes. Following the presentation, 3 breakout sessions explored 3 areas of affordability, accessibility, and applicability of education policies. Government officials made recommendations both for the ECA as well as for member states in bridging the gaps between sound education policies and positive socioeconomic outcomes. So in the next 3 slides, I am going to present the main recommendations that came out of this committee meeting. But before I go into it, I just want to emphasize the important work of the division. Its mandate is to help member states formulate policies that reduce poverty, improve inclusion, create jobs, reduce urban-rural divides, and also improve gender equality. And as you can see, that 7 out of the 17 sustainable development goals are under the purview of this division. And it's hard to do meaningful work without having data, resources, and partnerships. Next, please. So in this vein, 4 strategic areas were identified that can help member states improve social policies. These include improving data collection and analysis to enable evidence-based decision-making for policy formulation, advocacy, and accountability. Second, channeling more human, technical, and financial resources to skills development by developing the capacities and infrastructures needed to prepare young Africans for jobs for the future in order to improve social mobility and reduce poverty, and also expand the adoption of voluntary local reviews with a view to accelerating progress towards achieving the implementation of Agendas 2030 and 2063. You can't do without partners, so strengthening partnerships with key international and regional stakeholders and leveraging on best practices in the region. Last but not the least, to achieve sustainable development through systems thinking, member states were asked to establish coordination mechanisms which comprise of core ministries, departments, and agencies by using existing national institutional structures where possible to promote ownership and reduce duplication. At the same time, the committee also recommended a few areas for ECA to work on during 2024 and 2025. I will summarize the recommendations and also tell you how we are taking them on board. Next slide, please. So looking at the left-hand side on subprogram 9 on poverty, inequality, and urbanization, with more than half of the world's poor living in Africa, poverty reduction remains a priority. In this vein, our work will continue to help member states improve their capacities to estimate poverty and inequality with the aim to help them design more inclusive social policies, especially in the context of poly-crisis that we have been experiencing. Of course, social inclusion remains at the heart of having just societies. Here, as recommended by the committee, we are supporting member states in assessing social protection systems and providing actionable reforms to improve their coverage. This will also increase the resilience to economic shocks. With urbanization as a mega trend and 6 out of 10 people are expected to be living in cities by 2050, we need to ensure that we do not create urban slums. To deliver on this, we will be generating knowledge products on the impacts of rapid urbanization to support member states' capacity to respond to emerging challenges and prioritizing issues related to vulnerable population, informality, and inequality. Lastly, in order to deliver on services to urban population, member states need resources. Here, ECA will provide technical assistance to member states in assessing their fiscal space. This will be done using the methodology already developed for some cities like Addis Ababa, Dar es Salaam, Kigali. Coming to, on the right-hand side, on sub-program 6 related to gender, with Africa falling behind the rest of the world in meeting its gender equality goals, bringing it to the center is a primary objective. And instead of adopting a piecemeal approach, we will need to assess gender equality more holistically. In this regard, we will help member states to use fiscal policy to address financial inclusion, as well as help them in adopting gender-responsive budgeting. Here, ECA will undertake analytical work that to assess structural, institutional, legal, regulatory, social, and cultural barriers to women's financial inclusion. On progress towards Goal 5, well, ECA estimates show that at the current rate of progress, we will achieve gender equality only by 2094. And I think we all can agree that this is unacceptable. We need to actually move faster, which means we need to continuously monitor our progress. So in this vein, we will be providing technical assistance. We'll continue to do this with our monitoring tools, including African Gender Development Index, AGDI, and Africa Gender Index, AGI. Additionally, we need to establish an Africa Gender Equality Observatory, which is very similar to the one in Latin America and the Caribbean, to monitor and analyze the progress on gender-sensitive equality policies and regulations, and also to provide data and information to policymakers to make more informed decisions. Last but not the least here, as digital technologies are unfolding and paving the way for the fourth industrial revolution, we need to ensure that our women and girls do not get left behind. And in Africa, African women have immense potential to shape the continent's digital transformation agenda. Just to give you a sense, at around 47%, Africa has the highest proportion of females graduating from STEM courses globally. However, these numbers do not translate into females pursuing careers in STEM. And this doesn't have to do with the access to digital technology or also digital connectivity, but more to do with their digital literacy, skills, and usage. So in this vein, ECA has developed a 5-pillar capacity development strategy to digitally upskill women and girls across Africa to address this gap in skills and usage. Finally, next slide, please. I would like to conclude with some thoughts on how member states can achieve education-related development aspirations and what role ECA can play here. To ensure access to equal opportunities in the sphere of education, member states should mobilize domestic resources so that they can increase spending to expand access and affordability to education, especially for vulnerable population. Invest in monitoring and evaluating systems in order to better assess the needs of the beneficiaries and the inefficiencies in providing these services. Lastly, promote sustainable urbanization, prioritizing the accessibility to services like education through better planning and mobility. As education is recognized as a critical lever for achieving most of the SDGs, ECA should consider the following priorities. For instance, ECA should do a thorough analysis and identify and share good practices among member states on how to promote enrollment and retention, especially of young women and girls, in education at all levels. And ECA can help design better policies at urban scale. This means providing evidence-based policy advice on how to improve access to educational services in urban areas. And lastly, ECA can work with countries to assess the education system against current and future job opportunities and propose actionable reforms to ensure that education and Tibet match the job profiles in the country. This role can also be scaled at the continental level to ensure African youth are equipped with the right skills to support Africa's aspirations to structurally transform through industrialization, digitalization, and climate-friendly development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Saxena. One issue which I found of relevance is actually even if we don't increase the resources allocated, Rwanda was talking of even the current dollar you're putting into education, how efficient is it? So I think we need to look at that as well. And then again, the relevance of education systems, the impact of education for the future, all those issues, I think they're very critical. But thank you so much for your presentation. The next report is from Ben Soltani, please.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, dear partners, colleagues from the UN system. This morning, when concluding the session, DS Hanan mentioned a number of assets our continent has. And very rightly, she started with the human capital. And it is about the human capital that my presentation will be. Actually, if we do not nurture our human capital, give it opportunities to participate, first, to live decently, to participate in public life, to become entrepreneurs, to be part of the decision-making process, then whatever we say in these rooms actually, okay, I was about to say we'll need nowhere. Let me be positive, will not lead us very far. So we need really to rely on our human capital. The report I'm presenting, actually, the highlights of the report I'm presenting is about the work of IDEP. IDEP is the African Institute for Economic Development and Planning. It is the training arm of the ECA, and it is mandated to support African member states in developing their human capacity, and we also focus on institutional capacity. This report is something that is requested by the statute of IDEP. IDEP has a particular setting in the ECA's environment, and the statute of IDEP requires that we report to you annually on our activities. Next, please. So, what do we do and what are the areas of focus of the work of IDEP? We are guided by the overarching issues relating to achieving the SDGs with focus on selected ones, but the selection actually doesn't limit our involvement in the approach to the SDGs and the implementation of the Agenda 2063, and we were very much interested in being involved in the first decade of the implementation of Agenda 2063, and we are looking forward to a successful implementation of the second decade. So this is globally the umbrella of our work, and this leads to, I would say, a recurrent catalog of courses. But from year to year, we tend to focus on selected issues as we see fit, and we try also to anticipate on a number of issues or to be agile enough to adapt to the requests that we are receiving from our member states. So for the period that I'm presenting, basically there were these few areas. So in terms of macro, I will not go into all the details of the courses, there are many, but I will highlight some of them based on our discussions and your various areas of interest. So macroeconomic policies and development financing is, I would say, the heart of IDEP work, and it is how IDEP started actually. All its courses were revolving around this area when the institute was launched. During this year, we have worked on two main areas. risk management and foresight. And I'm very happy to have heard a number of delegates actually mentioning, for example, risk linked to investment, risk linked to climate change. And it is in that way that we have approached actually the courses that we have provided on risk. And what is interesting to note is that, I mean, we do not teach. Actually, we follow up with our alumni and see how they can translate the knowledge they have acquired during our courses into operations. It is what our chair has been saying throughout. We have to operationalize the great ideas we have. So, for example, in the case of Niger, there has been a program launched by alumni, people who attended our course on housing and croplands flood protection. And somebody was discussing early warning systems, for example, due to thanks to what they have acquired in terms of knowledge, in terms of risk management, they were able to build a program on that. We are also working on climate change and food security. And again, here we have, since we are convinced that our continent will not succeed if we do not have a place and a voice to women and youth, we are involving them in a number of activities. And as far as the youth are concerned, actually we have organized courses with them on climate change negotiation so that they can be able not just be observers during COPs, but be actors and lead the debate. In terms of regional integration, economic diversification, and sustainable industrialization, again, a focus on the role of gender in youth in the AFCFTA, in addition to all what we do for AFCFTA. In terms of sustainable industrialization, we are in discussion with the University of Johannesburg, South Africa, for a second step of a master's program on industrial policies. We have already had 5 years of implementation of the master's program on industrial policies, and now we are adapting it to greening industrialization, creating more jobs, giving a place to the youth. And we are also in discussion with Polytechnique Yamoussoukro in Côte d'Ivoire to have the same master's program in French. In terms of infrastructure, again, there is a range of courses, but I wanted to focus on 2 of them about energy access and the regulatory issues linked to the electricity market with the involvement of the private sector that we have organized with our headquarters. And again, these are here to try to provide answers to a number of priorities. I will not go through all of them, but just let me mention for the social dimension, following my colleague's presentation, that for the last 3 years, we have been working on introducing digital tools into the TVET so that our learning systems can adapt to the development of the ICTs and be able to integrate them so that we reach out to more people and integrate more people. And you have heard that from a policy perspective, this is very much in line with what has been presented. And finally, technology, digitization, and innovation. We have started with courses on digital technology in public policies so to see how to mainstream digital into our national policies, but at the same time, we are preparing a course on digitization for decision makers, so that when you go to your decision makers or yourself, you make decisions, you are convinced that digital technology have a role to play. Next, please. So this was, I would say, the essence and the substance of our work. But at the same time, figures matter. Because, as I said, we really need to have enough people, enough main power to lead our programs, to design them, to implement them, and as has been said during the discussion yesterday and today, to be able to monitor them and prove that they were efficient. And for that, we are happy to report that we have trained more than 300 people, and you see the curve actually of the progression of the number of people we have been training, and this is thanks to our utilization of e-learning systems. We have also, through our think tank role, been able to organize meetings with a number of thinkers, and we encourage them to think out of the box, not to come with ready-made ideas, so that we can really lead the discussion about Africa's development. And in this context, we have involved the Young Economist Network that you can see as Yen here, because again, as I said, we try to be consistent with ourselves. We think that the youth have a role to play, and today we have close to 90 African universities in the network, and more than 1,000 youth participating. We have trained them in macro modeling because it is the area of focus of the network, and now we are progressing to involve them in the research aspect. And somebody was mentioning how we can support research in Africa, and I think that it is our contribution to that discussion to build a bridge between the academia and the decision-making system. And we are working under the guidance of a strategic plan that was for the period 2019-2023. So it came to an end last year, and we made an external independent evaluation, and we are very happy to report on the figures actually that came out of this evaluation, because it was very positive. But of course, what we will be focusing on from now on is the gaps and the weaknesses that the evaluation has identified, so that we can progress together. Next slide, please. We can do nothing without your guidance and without your support. And for us, your participation in our thinking, in our work, is key. And I'm happy to report that after your recommendation for resolution 2023-10 and 2023-14 last year, we were able to propose to go to New York, to our headquarters, with your recommendation for an increase of the UN grant of the ECA, and we got that increase. It is a little less than what we were expecting, but at least it is a positive trend, especially given the current circumstances. And this will boost the e-learning program and our proposal to organize an annual Africa Macro Economic Modeling Day, where we will bring all the modelers so that we can discuss a number of issues and the orientation of their work and the research area. Your contribution is not only the moral support, but it is also financial. As you know, all your countries are to contribute to EDEP budget through an annual assessed contribution. And you can see that this has been uneven through the years, with last year not being the most successful one. But I would like to very warmly congratulate and thank those who have contributed to our budget last year. And we have, for a number of countries, not all of them, accumulated arrears, and again, this gives me the opportunity to call upon you to express your support to EDEP through financial means. And one of my colleagues has been circulating this morning with letters to your capitals, so please convey them so that we can try to limit this critical situation. Next, please. So, as I said, EDEP is quite particular since we have a governing council. Our governing council met in July in Addis Ababa last year, and among the various recommendations that we have received from the members, and the members of the Governing Council actually are, the Governing Council is chaired by the Executive Secretary of the ECA. There are two sort of permanent seats, one for the Africa Union Commission, which is normal, and one to Senegal, who is the host country for ECA, for IDEP. And we have two country members participating from each one of the sub-regions, so 10, on a rotating basis. And when they met in Addis in July, they recommended that we go deeper in the country level capacity needs assessment so that we are really very close to what countries are expecting. They again raised concern about the budget of the Institute and the low level of member state contribution. They have taken note of the strategic plan evaluation process, and they will support us and be with us in the design of the new one, which would run from 2025 to 2029. They raised the issue of whether or not, which we do not do so far, limit access to those who are maybe not the good payers, and this is something to be discussed with them again. We are still waiting for the nomination of 2 members of the governing councils. 2 countries are still to give us their representative, and they approved the membership of the Technical Advisory Committee that oversees all our substantive work. Next, please. Next, please. So, what will we do once we have presented all this work? We will continue, of course, to work and have our catalogue of work with recurrent courses, as I said, under the umbrella of Agenda 2063, second decade, and the SDGs. But for 2024, our main area of focus would be social protection. We have seen with the COVID crisis how fragile our members were actually to translate their economic gains into social dividends. And I think that developing programs, stronger programs for social protection is a must and is urgent. We will continue working on foresight. We organized a course on foresight that trained close to 300 people last year, and we have a course actually on foresight running starting this week, and applications are still open. So if you are interested or you know people interested in foresight, please encourage them, and digital transformation. And these are very much in line with the United Nations 2.0 quintet of change that gives a very prominent role to foresight so that our countries be better equipped actually in their planning processes, so that in addition to short-term perspective, they can see very far away, and they can really be able to integrate long-term issues in their planning processes. And I'm happy, Chair, to have heard you mention again the importance of monitoring and evaluation. And again, here, whatever we will do, we will be developing it with monitoring and evaluation strategy so that we can show and demonstrate the relevance of the courses and the impact they have had on our member state. We will work on our strategic plan, we will continue resource mobilization, and a very important event for IDEP and all the United Nations institutions that are based in Senegal. Actually, we will, thanks to the government of Senegal, we will all be moving together to a common house that is called Diamniadio UN House, and this will strengthen the synergy. You know that we have been applying the One UN concept, and through the move to Diamniadio, the 33 UN entities present in Senegal will strengthen their ties, their relations, become more efficient, and IDEP will also be part of all this. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of issues, observation. I think you mentioned the issue of country level capacity assessment needs. I think those are critical, really, so that we are demand driven at IDEP. My worry is the financial sustainability. I hope you gave us a letter for Zimbabwe. I want to know how much we owe, because I can't be hosting and I'm in arrears. It doesn't make sense. So but also if I think the problem, Africa, we are notorious for not supporting our institutions. I think we need to change our attitude. If these are our institutions, we need to support them and let's pay. And I want to commit Zimbabwe will pay. I want our figure so that we can pay and clear our arrears on this aspect. And then I saw your numbers. You have so many attendants from countries in arrears. Why don't you bar them from attending? Why do you entertain training those who are in arrears, including me? Us, if you're in arrears, why do you train us? Huh? I think we need to start being firm with ourselves so that we make sense to others. Okay, but thank you so much. Human capacity development, critical. Our next presentation is on the proposed program plan for 2025. This will be by Daya Brangate, the Director for Strategic Planning Oversight and Results Division. Daya? Oh, she's there. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just a quick correction, I'm not director. I'm just the chief of the corporate policy and planning section within the strategic
I promoted you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Very much grateful. So my presentation will be focusing on the proposed program plan for 2025 of Section 18, which is being submitted for your adoption. So the presentation refers to the respective first parts of two documents that are available on the ECA's website, including the summary of the proposed plan and budget with a reference E/ECA/COE/42/16 and the full draft of the proposed program plan and budget with a reference E/ECA/COE/42/INF/2. So the program plan which is being presented to you today is a result of very intense consultations between the Strategic Planning Oversight and Result Division, which is overseeing the preparation of the program plan, with all the 13 sub-programs at ECA. And this round of consultation started sometime last year in December, following a specific template and guidelines provided by the Program Planning and Budget Division at the UN headquarters. And that's the reason why my colleagues from the division, sub-regional offices, and IDEP will also be in a position to answer any question you may have in more detail. Most importantly, the program plan includes reorganizational changes that are being proposed by ECA to tackle emerging priorities, and I will be describing them later. So the outline of my presentation will include a first part on adapting to the current context, a second part on ECA's strategic directions, a third part on pressing needs and emerging priorities, and fourth part on the realignment of ECA's program of work, and the last but not least, the fifth part on the snapshot of the 2025 program plan by sub-program. Next, please. So as you have seen from previous presentations, we are evolving in a very difficult context, which is marked by recurrent crises and conflicts that have been increasing the vulnerability of countries to shocks, as well as to socio-economic, geopolitical, and environmental shifts. However, we have also seen that this worrying scenario can lead to opportunities for ECA to have a lasting footprint. Hence, the emphasis on preparedness, responsiveness, and adaptive management while implementing the program plan. The African Union Summit at its 37th ordinary session, which was concluded a little bit of 10 days ago, launched the second 10-year implementation plan for the Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. And to make it happen, in order to foster its implementation, the African Union, together with close partners such as ECA, are emphasizing on the need to adopt an harmonized and integrated approach towards those two agendas, following the concept of two agendas, one framework, in order to enhance their alignment and ensure optimum impacts, even more so when the SDG implementation is lagging so much behind. And this is the reason why the UN has identified entry points, or the 6 transitions which have already been described several times in previous presentations. Next slide. And the good news is that ECA is very well positioned and equipped to contribute to assist the countries, regional economic communities and organizations, as well as other stakeholder institutions in accelerating the implementation of both agendas. And as part of its mandate, ECA has 5 strategic directions, focusing on building analytical capabilities and knowledge to feed back into policy making, formulating macroeconomic and structural policy for the transformation of Africa, among other policies, designing innovative financing models, integrating regional and sub-regional initiatives, and advocating the African position at the global level and developing regional responses. And these 5 strategic directions are being supported by 3 core functions of think tank, convening as well as the operational function through the provision of advisory services, technical support, training, and capacity development. And both directions and functions have been guiding the elaboration of the program plan. Next, please. Within this strategic framework, and with a view to addressing pressing needs and emerging priorities on the continent, ECA is planning to upscale its responses towards enhancing regional integration, economic diversification, and sustainable industrialization as main engines of equitable growth. Also supporting macroeconomic policies and development financing to boost resource mobilization. Underscoring the importance of the science, policy, society interface and technology, as well as energy infrastructure development to prepare for the next tech revolutions, and providing solutions to tackle food insecurity and climate change. Underpinning these actions is ECA's core work on data and statistics, as well as mainstreaming of social dimensions. Next, please. In order to deliver this program of work in the most effective and efficient way, ECA proposes some realignment at the level of internal sectional work within 3 sub-programs. The initial sub-program 3 on private sector development and finance is to inherit work on technology and digital transformation from the sub-program 5 on technology, climate change, and natural resource management, which in its turn will receive the portfolio on land and agricultural transformation from the original sub-program 3 in an attempt to holistically comprehend natural resource management. The newly proposed sub-program 3, which will continue to work on energy and infrastructure development, is to be titled Technology, Innovation, Connectivity, and Infrastructure Development. And the new sub-program 5 is to be called Climate, Food Security, and Natural Resources, Green and Blue Economy. The sub-program 1 is expected to inherit the work on innovative finance and capital markets from the former sub-program 3 and be renamed as Macroeconomic Policy, Finance, and Governance. Next, please. The following 4 slides provide a snapshot of the planned intervention of the proposed program plan for 2025. They are only very key examples without being exhaustive of the contents of the documents I was referencing in my introduction. As an example, the renamed subprogram 1 will pursue its support towards the customization of the integrated planning and reporting toolkit, which was presented in previous presentation, as well as on tracking the progress of implementation of the 2030 and 2063 agendas. The subprogram 2 on regional integration and trade will continue to support members of ECA and REX in operationalizing the AFCFTA with a special focus on economic diversification and sustainable industrialization. The new subprogram 3 will pursue its support of the program infrastructure development in Africa within the framework of the second 10-year implementation plan of the AU. Next, please. The subprogram 4 on data and statistics will pursue its support towards the strengthening of national statistical systems through digital transformation and modernization, and will also look at how to better integrate statistical and geospatial information within related networks. The new subprogram 5 will pursue its support on sustainable planning policy formulation related to the green and blue economy, as well as agricultural and food systems transformation. And the subprogram will also continue to convene peer learning, policy dialogues and platforms such as the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, the Climate Change and Development in Africa Conference, and the Conference on Land Policy in Africa. I will not dwell on the SP6 and SP9 because related plan intervention were already articulated in the presentation made by the Director of the Gender Division. Next, please. The subprogram 7 on sub-regional activities for development in North Africa will pursue its work on the development of evidence-based policies to leverage migrants' economic contributions. The subprogram 7 on sub-regional activities for development in West Africa will pursue its support towards strengthening capacities in integrating the demographic dividend in planning and budgeting frameworks. The subprogram 7 on sub-regional activities for development in Central Africa will pursue its work on strengthening regional value chains and industrial clusters as part of its efforts on economic diversification. The subprogram 7 on sub-regional activities for development in East Africa will continue to contribute towards enhanced capacity in designing and implementing policy frameworks on trade, the blue economy, and tourism, and it will also continue its support towards the operationalization of the AFCFTA. The subprogram 7 on sub-regional activities for development in Southern Africa, the next please, will continue to support the implementation of the SADC Industrialization Strategy and Roadmap, the SADC Regional Energy Access Strategy and Action Plan, and the COMESA Industrial Policy. I will not also dwell on the subprogram 8 because the Director of IDEP has already been elaborating in a very detailed way on the plan interventions for 2025. So I will go straight to my conclusion. ECA has also been paying attention to the cost-cutting issues and will continue to integrate gender perspective in all its operational activities, the deliverables and results. And in line with the UN-related policies and strategies, ECA will also continue to pursue the implementation of disability inclusion-related measures, as well as the mainstreaming of human rights and environmental sustainability. Most importantly, ECA will enhance its joint planning and delivery between and among the sub-programs to avoid duplication, and will continue to ensure a sound resource utilization rate while implementing the 2025 program plan. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I think it's at the level of director level. That's why I promoted you. Okay. On a serious note, thank you so much for the presentation. I think for us it's important to review the proposed program plan for 2025 and then see if it fits into the thinking among us. And I don't know how far we can change anything, or in terms of the issues in the sub-programs, I'm not so sure I stand guided. But for me, overall, I think the fact that the program is now looking at emerging issues is not fixed on the past. We are looking at emerging issues and the environment, which is complex, it's changing, etc. I think that's a plus for the program. So we will look at that when the others comment from the floor. Can we now have the budget now which supports this program from Carlos Haddad? Thank you.
Excellencies, fellow directors and colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me a great pleasure to address you and briefly present the 2025 proposed program budget as shown in the document E/ECA/COE/42/6. I would like to thank the chair for giving me the time to make this presentation. This presentation has two aims. Firstly, to show the overall 2025 budget proposal, and second, to explain any increases or decreases and how ECA is innovatively catering for the increased demands from member states without necessarily increasing the budget. Next. ECA has three regular budget sections. First, section 11, which is United Nations System Support for the African Union's Agenda 2063. The second one is section 18, Economic and Social Development in Africa, which is our main source of funding. And section 23, the regular Program of Technical Cooperation, or RPTC. The proposed overall 2025 budget of 126.74 million for all three sections reflects the 2024 appropriation. This means this is a zero growth compared to the 2024 budget. This is in alignment with the Secretary General's proposed budget level and provide for the full, efficient, and effective implementation of ECA's mandate. As my colleague Daya mentioned, ECA has made a slight adjustment to its current structure to highlight the growing importance of technologies and innovation as a driver of economic growth and competitiveness. The resources have therefore been aligned with the new structure. Please note that we report extra budgetary proposals under section 18, which reflect ECA's expectation to mobilize resources for the year 2025. Also note that the budget document is undergoing several reviews and revisions at ECA, and then at headquarters, UN headquarters, and the final version may vary slightly than the one we have. Next. This slide shows the two components of ECA's main budget, section 18, which is the regular budget RB, and the extra budgetary XB. Under section 18, we are proposing a total budget of 93.57 million for RB and 22.23 million under the XB. The decrease of 4.8 million in the projections of XB resources forecast for 2025 is explained by the fact that this projection is based on current 2024 expectations. There will be additional XB resources to be mobilized in 2024 and 2025. ECA has embarked on a strategic, programmatic, and holistic approach to XB mobilization. In that respect, efforts are underway to develop multi-year integrated programs for purposes of mobilizing additional XB resources. The 534 regular posts to be carried forward will cost 62.1 million. The posts are distributed between professional, general service, and national officers categories. The 22.23 million that we envisage mobilizing under XB resources will fund 68 posts costing 5.2 million. The remaining XB resources of 17.03 million will support the non-post activities. Extra budgetary resources represent 19% of the total XB resource requirements, while the remaining 81% are sourced from the regular budget. The total proposed regular and extra budgetary resources under this section for the year 2025 is therefore 115.9 million. Next. This slide shows the distribution of the RB resources per sub-program. For example, sub-program 7, sub-regional activities for development representing the 5 sub-regional offices, Kigali, Yaoundé, Rabat, Niamey, and Lusaka, will receive a sum of 17.5 million of the total regular budget to support the region's member states. Next. This slide shows the distribution of non-post resources into different expense categories. For instance, we plan to spend the sum of 6.6 million and 8.9 million under general operating expenses and contractual services, respectively. Next. In this slide, we demonstrate how the XB resources are allocated among ECA divisions. For example, climate change, environment, and natural resource management, which is now replaced with a new sub-program called Climate, Food Security, and Natural Resources, Green and Blue Economy, in short, CFSN, is appropriated a sum of 6.5 million. Next. This slide provides a summary of the proposal under Section 11, the United Nations System Support for African Union's Agenda 2063. We are proposing a budget of 1,096,000 representing both posts equaling 868,000 and non-post resources equaling 228,100 USD. Next. This slide presents a summary of the proposal under Section 23, Regional Program of Technical Cooperation. The resources here are of non-post nature and are used to support African countries in their capacity development efforts. The total proposed is 9.3 million, and the major expenditures fall under other staff costs for advisory services and fellowships, grants, and contributions for fellows and workshops. Next. Ladies and gentlemen, in summary, the 2025 proposed resources are as follows. Section 18, regular budget, 93.57 million. Section 18, extra budgetary, 22.23 million. Section 11, 1,096,000. And Section 23, 9.84 million. That is a total of 126.67 million USD for ECA. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have the program and now we have the budget. And one feature I announced is the zero budget. And then for me, we talked of the recalibrated structure, realignment of the resources, etc. How does that now relate to the posts, in terms of the posts and the structure realignment? Has there not been impact on the number on the post, etc.? That's one issue I wanted clarity. And then for most budgets, you'd have indicators of budgetary efficiencies, to say certain percentages, indicators of maybe the salaries to the total budget expenditures, etc., etc. Do we have such guidelines in terms of indicators of budgetary efficiency? And then the third one, I was consulting with Alhaji, was on the role which all the member countries play in this whole budgetary process, so that when we come here, nothing is new, we've made contributions, etc., etc. Those are my three or so observations. Thank you so much. Now we're moving to the fourth report. This is the report on United Nations support for the African Union and its new Partnership for Africa's Development Program. This will be done by Said. Welcome back, Saidi. Let's hear your story.
Thank you very much, Chair. And it's a pleasure for me to be back and to take back the position. The report I will be presenting is a report of the United Nations System Support to the African Union and the new Partnership for Africa's Development, document E/ECA/COE/42/17. This is not a report of only ECA activities. It's a report of the United Nations system to the African Union and its new Partnership for Development. Let me provide a context. In 2018, the chairperson of the African Union Commission and the Secretary General of the UN signed a joint agreement called AU-UN Joint Framework for the implementation of Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030. Prior to that, in 2017, they also signed a joint framework on AU-UN Joint Framework on Enhanced Peace and Security. The latter was to support the African Union in the process of promoting peace and security in Africa, and the former was to provide a common platform or framework for the implementation of Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030. You would agree with me that if member states have to follow Agenda 2063, follow Agenda 2030, and also follow their programs at the level of the regional economic communities, they will be drawn in different directions. So the agreement was that let's have a joint framework for the implementation of Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030, and let's also bring all the UN agencies together, particularly at the regional level, to work in a much more cohesive and collective way with the African Union, in particular supporting the African Union in the implementation of Agenda 2063. Next slide, please. The context which I've provided is what is called 2 agendas, 1 framework. In other words, we've got 2 agendas, but we have a common framework of implementation, both working together. Underlining that is also the agreement reached by both parties that the primacy of the African Union, the agency of the African Union, will be emphasized. In other words, the UN will support the African Union much more in terms of the implementation of the 2 programs. The African Union will be in driver's seat, while the United Nations development system at the regional level will support the African Union. This is just a few highlights in terms of the areas of work in 2023, and we've identified 3 major areas. One is in strengthening AU-UN partnership to deliver on Agenda 2063 and the SDGs, Agenda 2030. The UN system-wide coordinated action to deliver on Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030 at the country level, working together to make sure that we deliver at the country level. And the final thing is area is promoting Africa's voice, interest, and space at the global level. The 2 parties working collectively together. Next slide, please. In terms of the key achievements, the structure of collaboration between the African Union and the UN was reorganized, or if you like, recalibrated, to make it much more impactful. Now we've got about 3 or 4 layers of engagement. The first layer is the AU-UN Annual Conference. This is led by the chairperson of the African Union and the Secretary General of the United Nations. That is the highest layer. And that's why they give broad direction in terms of what should be done together. They spell out the key priorities, and they give matching orders to both parties in terms of the direction of travel where they would like to go. And below that is what is called the high-level policy dialogue. The high-level policy dialogue is between the Deputy Chairperson of the African Union and the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. Beneath that is what is now called the college to college, meaning heads of UN agencies, funds, and programs to also meet with the commissioners of the African Union to discuss policy issues and to discuss how they work together. And finally is the African Collaborative Platform, which is more at a directors level, working closely with the directors of the African Union. So we've had a structure, a pyramid structure, that is interfaced, well interfaced between the African Union and the UN to make this much more impactful. And a major result that was achieved this year was the signing of the African Union, Africa Human Rights Framework, which both the UN and the African Union have been working together on for years. But finally, in December, on November 28, 2023, the African Human Rights Framework was approved, was signed by both parties, by the Secretary General of the United Nations and also the chairperson of the African Union in New York. The UN system also worked very closely together with the African Union in the evaluation of the first 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063. And the UN system also supported the formulation of the second 10-year implementation plan, which is from 2024 to 2034. We are currently discussing with them on the implementation modalities and the role that the United Nations will be playing in supporting the implementation of the second 10-year implementation plan. Indeed, a meeting will be taking place next week between the African Union and all other stakeholders, including the UN, on the elaboration and implementation of the second 10-year implementation plan. The UN system supported the African Union in terms of developing the African credit rating system and also the credit rating review in terms of improving Africa credit ratings. These are just few highlights. A lot much more was done, and if you look at the report, you will certainly see some of the other key achievements there. Next slide, please. In terms of the UN system working in a coordinated action to support member states of the African Union through the UN cities on delivering Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2030, There was support to 15 country teams in designing common country assessment and UN Sustainable Development Cooperation frameworks in 2023. The UN Cooperation Framework is a mechanism by which the UN at the country level, engages the African Union member states. And it's through that that UN supports in terms of the implementation of the programs and activities of the member states. There was the Harmonized Regional Policy Framework for the implementation of the Great Bull Wall Initiative, the domestication of the CFTA through national CFTA strategies, and of course, the implementation processes. The UN is working very closely in implementing the CFTA strategies which member states have developed. There was a development of the UN African Data and Statistics System, and of course, the launch and operationalization of the African Knowledge Management Hub. The African Knowledge Management Hub brings together is a repository of expertise that the UN has got at the regional level, which not only the UN system at the country level can tap into, but also the African Union can also make use of. So if you go into that particular online portal, you will see the repository of the expertise that UN has got at the country level, at the regional level, which can be used at the country level. Next slide, please. In terms of promoting Africa's voice, interest, and space at the global level, the UN has coordinated very strongly with the African Union on the reform of the global financial architecture in order to unlock financial resources for Africa. We've also worked very closely as the UN with the African Union on combating illicit financial flows to increase domestic resources for delivering on Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030. The UN worked very closely with the African Union in terms of the Tax Cooperation Convention that has been mentioned earlier on. And there were very major events that took place at the global level. The market and scale, unlocking industrialization through inter-Africa trade, through the Africa Dialogue Series. The Africa Dialogue Series takes place in New York, and it brings together different constituencies. It is led by the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa to the Secretary General of the UN, and it provides a global platform for Africa's voice to be heard, for issues relating to Africa to be tabled and discussed at the global level. So there was, and annually, there is an African Dialogue Series with different themes. In 2023, it was on market and scale, unlocking industrialization through inter-Africa trade. Another major platform at the global level is what is called the Interdepartmental Task Force on African Affairs, that brings UN agencies together at the global level, together with the African Union, to discuss things that have pertinent interest to Africa. And in 2023, the emphasis was on digital transformation and food systems in Africa through global partnership. How do we promote digital transformation and food systems and food security in Africa? By forging global partnership in doing so. Next slide, please. We think it's important to share a brief highlight of the second 10-year implementation plan of the African Union. This slide shows what is called the 7 moonshots. The 7 moonshots constitute the aspiration that Africa seeks to achieve by 2034. That's what it seeks to achieve. The first moonshot is about creating a prosperous Africa. And the goal here is that every AU member state must attain a middle income status by 2034. We hope that is doable. And that's one thing that ECA and other UN agencies will have to support. The ambition of the African Union through the second 10-year implementation plan that we must all attain middle income status by 2034. We must also have an Africa that is more integrated and very well connected. In other words, the issue of digitalization, digital connectivity, road transportation, all those things have to be done. Creating a digital basis of transportation across the continent, and perhaps also the issue of the free movement of people, goods, and services across the continent. is part of the connectivity. We want an Africa that will be integrated by 2034 and well connected. A democratic Africa, an Africa in which public institutions are more responsive and public institutions are resilient and they are relatively autonomous to be able to drive development. Because you need institutions that are fairly autonomous to be able to support development in our respective countries. A very peaceful Africa, an Africa in which conflict will be resolved very amicably, a cultured Africa, an Africa where values are explicit and are promoted, African culture, African values, African heritage are well promoted on the continent, a people-driven Africa, not a state-driven Africa, a people-driven Africa, an Africa where the citizens are more empowered and more productive, and in which the people becomes the means and end of development. And for Africa to also forge a partnership that can promote development and transformation. An Africa that is strong, that is resilient, and that is an influential global player. Of course, the membership of the AU in the G20 is already gradually bringing that to the global stage. An Africa that can be a global player, and have its voice heard in the global system. Next slide, please. Chair, this is the conclusion. I think for us, the future of the continent is in its present. In other words, the future starts now. The future is not something to be deferred. The AU's membership of the G20 is a great leap forward, and the UN has committed itself to support the African Union in this process, and this is to be led by the ECA. Already we're having consultations with the AU on how to support the AU's membership of the G20 so that Africa's voice can be heard and heard very loudly, and key issues relating to Africa, issues of debt restructuring, issues of the imbalance in the global financial architecture, reform of the global financial, those issues are issues that should be put on the table through the G20. Africa's voice being heard. The UN is standing behind the African Union to make this happen. The Summit of the Future will provide a new global pact of development and social transformation. AU and the UN will work together in articulating a common Africa position at the Summit of the Future. The AU theme of the year on education should provide a new pathway to leapfrog Africa's development through quality education, technology, and innovation. Already, the AU and the UN are working together. The summit was just held in February, on February 17 and 18, and currently we are working together to make sure that we really actualize the objectives of the theme of the year of 2024. Strong collaboration between the AU and UN is essential in realizing the 7 moonshots of the second 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063 by 2034. Again, we are standing shoulder to shoulder with the African Union to make sure this is realized. And finally, the aspiration of a peaceful, democratic, and prosperous Africa hinges on a strong partnership between the AU, the UN, and other key strategic partners. We look into the future with optimism, and we hope that in the next 10 years, we have a different story to tell. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I see the ambition. Yes, we need the ambition, strong ambition, but we need to bring them into action. What strategies do we have to achieve the ambition? I think that is fundamental. Thank you so much for the report and update. And I sincerely hope the AU's membership to the G20 will be productive and contribute to a difference on the outcomes coming from the G20, especially on the debt issues. I hope we can be strong enough in the G20 as represented by the AU. So let me thank all the presenters, and I want to open the conversation to the floor. I think I'll be liberal. You can comment on any of the papers. You just indicate which paper you're commenting on so that we can take down the comments and the questions and then the appropriate directorships can respond. So the floor is open for discussion. Thank you. Burundi, you can start. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Alors, merci de me donner la parole. Moi, je suis de la Banque centrale. Si je reviens un peu à la thématique centrale de notre conférence, qui porte sur le financement de la transition vers des économies vertes inclusives en Afrique, je n'ai pas beaucoup entendu de financement du rôle des banques centrales dans le financement. C'est beaucoup plus la politique budgétaire qui est revenue. Donc très peu d'interventions parlaient du rôle de la Banque centrale. Et là, je reviens sur l'intervention de notre délégué de la Banque centrale du Maroc qui est revenu brièvement sur le fait qu'ils mettent en place une politique monétaire ciblée. Et elle a dit ciblée et proactive. Là, c'est pour avoir plus de précision sur ce volet-là, pour que dans les résolutions, on puisse avoir quelque chose qu'on soit plus ou moins exhaustif. Il ne faudrait pas qu'on se focalise beaucoup plus sur la politique donc budgétaire, mais également que l'on puisse analyser ce que la politique monétaire peut faire dans le financement, surtout qu'avec nos instruments, c'est beaucoup plus de court terme. C'est pour avoir une idée sur l'expérience des autres banques centrales à ce niveau-là, surtout au niveau des instruments qui sont utilisés. Est-ce que le refinancement qui est donné, c'est le même type de refinancement en termes de garantie, en termes de délai, mais également en termes de partenaires? Est-ce qu'on finance à travers les banques commerciales ou bien à travers justement directement avec l'État? S'il y a peut-être des pays ici ou bien peut-être d'autres banques centrales qui sont dans l'Assemblée, elles peuvent donc également partager l'expérience. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. One would assume that macroeconomic stability would require both monetary policy and fiscal policy to work together. I think that's very critical. I don't think we can achieve. They are very critical for coordination, etc., and everything. The Gambia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to commend the presenters for very, very good papers that are presented. I just want to comment on the presentation by IDEP, that is the African Institute for Economic Development and Planning. I think whatever we say here, the issue of capacity development is very crucial for us to attain the objectives that we are setting for ourselves here. And I think IDEP over the years has been very responsive to the needs of member states. Currently, I'm at the central bank, but just recently, I was at the Ministry of Finance and I had cause to work very closely with IDEP. And if anything, I want to encourage the institution to continue to strive to do better and for member states to continue to meet their obligations to funding the institution in a more robust way so that it can respond to our capacity development challenges. And to conclude, I just want to reiterate what the chair has said, that it will be very important that as we look at our development agenda as a country, that both fiscal and monetary policy be very coherent and that they work hand in hand, because it's not possible to achieve these objectives by focusing mainly on just fiscal policy or just to focus on monetary policy. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Can we have Benin?
Merci beaucoup. Je vais prendre la parole tout à l'heure. Je donnerai la parole également à mon collègue. Le premier point, c'est sur le rapport sur la pauvreté. L'un des premiers objectifs des ODD, c'est d'éliminer la pauvreté sous toutes ses formes. Et avec tout ce que nous avons connu comme crise, nous sommes en 2024, donc à 6 ans de 2030. Et le rapport qui nous est présenté il faudrait que concrètement qu'on dise la marche par rapport aux cibles à atteindre et bien évidemment comment nous comptons renverser la situation au regard des chocs que nous avons connus. Et donc, ça, c'est le premier point. Le deuxième point, nous avons l'impression, et ça nous le partageons tous, hein, on aborde des thématiques qu'on vit réellement, et c'est quand, au niveau international, c'est évoqué que nous sautons là-dessus. Alors qu'il y a des pas que nous faisons, peut-être que ce n'est pas connu, et donc on peut approfondir davantage cela et s'aligner quand même sur ce que les orientations nous donnent au niveau international. Et donc, on a l'impression qu'on parfois, on ne prend pas du temps à valoriser au mieux ce que nous-mêmes faisons. Et c'est pour cela que nous disons tout ce que nous sommes en train de dire, transition, c'est-à-dire en parlant de financement vert, en parlant de formation, de tout ça, le point commun de tout ceci, c'est l'éducation. Et je crois que quand on parle avec ces enjeux liés à l'intelligence artificielle, à l'énergie, tout ça, c'est qu'il faudra davantage former les nôtres. Il faudra davantage former. Et c'est pour cela que nous voulons suggérer qu'il y ait une étude peut-être au niveau sous-régional où on choisit un certain nombre de pays sur les métiers du futur, avec tout ce que nous connaissons comme évolution, dans le sens à ce que dès que nous avons une cartographie de tout cela, on regarde nos potentialités, que nous faisons mieux d'en tirer profit au niveau des pays. Surtout qu'il y a certains pays qui vont renforcer davantage leur cadre de planification et avoir une vision à long terme. Nous avons apprécié j'allais dire le rapport de l'IDEP avec les innovations qui vont avec. Nous avons bien apprécié cela. Et je crois que les différents stagiaires ou bien les différentes formations que vous menez, les bénéficiaires, on peut en fait comme des vivriers pour renforcer les formations au niveau des États. Parce que comment faire pour pérenniser tout ceci? Vous l'avez évoqué, la question budgétaire qui est là. Vous avez des problèmes de ressources. Et donc, comment rationaliser? Et en fait, que s'il y a des formations parmi ceux-là qui ont été formés et qui sont disponibles et qui ont des compétences, on puisse les exploiter pour accompagner d'autres États. Et comme ça, on pourrait rationaliser tout ceci. Je crois que sur l'essentiel, je vais passer la parole au collègue qui va aborder notre point.
OK, merci. Mon intervention porte sur la mise en œuvre de l'agenda 2063 de l'Union africaine. Alors, nous avons constaté lors de l'évaluation du premier plan de mise en œuvre de cet agenda que cet agenda a souffert surtout d'abord d'une méconnaissance par les acteurs de mise en œuvre et enfin d'une non mise en œuvre de cet agenda au niveau des États membres. À l'instar de l'agenda 2030 qui a bénéficié de beaucoup d'appui du système des Nations Unies à travers ces agences, je suis heureux que la CEA se positionne pour accompagner les États dans la mise en œuvre de cet agenda. Je voudrais savoir, dans la pratique, comment est-ce que la CEA accompagne les États dans la domestication de cet agenda, de manière à ce que les différents États puissent implémenter cet agenda dans les différentes politiques et surtout dans le dispositif de suivi qui permet de mettre en place des indicateurs et de les suivre dans la pratique. Merci.
Ghana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so I want to make a comment on the budget. I observed the lines, the broad lines, and I saw that gender was 1.24 million, as against 5.3 and others in other lines. And I'm thinking, even over here, we are trying to empower women, and we know that there is always a saying that when you educate a woman, you educate a nation. And so we know the power of empowering women, and we know how entrenched this situation has been. And so I'm wondering why the budget over there, it's quite small compared to the other, like the macroeconomic policies and other things. And so is it that there is not much work to do there? Because if we are encouraging governments to include into their fiscal policy gender issues, why is it that at that level we seem to give a lower budget to promoting gender issues? And then I also looked at poverty and social policy budget, and I realized that likewise that area was smaller. And so I'm wondering, because these are very thematic areas that I think that the budget should rather have been heavy over there. That's my observation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ghana. Cameroon, please, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, pour la parole donnée. Permettez-moi, à l'entente de mon propos, de féliciter la manière avec laquelle vous dirigez nos travaux. Monsieur le Président, je voudrais faire très rapidement deux observations. L'une sur le budget présenté et dit que l'absence d'exhaustivité de l'information sur le budget présenté nous amène quelque peu à nous interroger sur certains fondamentaux de ce budget, notamment l'absence d'informations sur les sources de financement du budget. Je crois que le directeur n'en a pas fait cas. Également, les objectifs poursuivis n'ont pas été présentés, ainsi que les indicateurs de résultats associés à chaque projet. L'autre observation, toujours sur le budget, c'est le budget extraordinaire que le directeur a présenté. Et notre questionnement, c'est sur ce budget extraordinaire-là qui vient dans la présentation violer le principe universel d'unité budgétaire. Et donc nous voulons savoir ce qui explique que peut-être au cours de la prévision, au cours des prévisions, ce budget extraordinaire-là et dont la mobilisation des ressources dédiées n'est pas précise. L'autre observation, c'est sur le rapport de l'agenda 2063 et dont nous apprécions la proposition qui est faite de publier la revue africaine de notation de crédit, parce que cette publication, peut-être qu'elle viendra minimiser les risques qui pèsent sur la notation de crédit en Afrique, parce que nous avons tendance à voir les agences de notation très rapidement abaisser la note des entités africaines, parce que pour des questions de gouvernance ou bien pour des questions de sécurité, alors que l'Afrique offre du potentiel, l'Afrique offre des services écosystémiques qui peuvent contrebalancer ces contraintes-là. Je ferai ici allusion au potentiel faunique, au potentiel forestier dont l'Afrique dispose et qui concourt à équilibrer l'écosystème, qui concourt à rééquilibrer, à contrebalancer les changements climatiques et qui pourrait être tenu ou alors pris en compte dans la notation de crédit en Afrique. Donc il est important peut-être que la publication de ce rapport-là revienne là-dessus, sur le potentiel écosystémique, les services écosystémiques que l'Afrique offre pour pouvoir contrebalancer ce que l'Afrique a. L'autre observation, c'est sur la deuxième phase décennale de mise en œuvre de l'agenda 2063. Et dans la présentation, nous attendions à ce que la structure d'évaluation des coûts de mise en œuvre de cette deuxième phase-là soit articulée. Je ne sais pas si elle nous a échappé ou bien le directeur a voulu, peut-être que n'a pas voulu insister là-dessus, mais c'est une préoccupation parce que la première phase décennale a connu quelques entraves liées au financement et liées à l'alignement des cibles. L'alignement des cibles, je crois qu'il y a un participant qui l'a relevé qu'il était important que les différents agendas soient alignés. On a parlé de l'agenda 2063 qui doit être aligné avec l'agenda 2030. Et ensemble, il faudrait que ces agendas-là soient également alignés aux agendas régionaux et nationaux. Et donc, il en est de même des cibles parce que dans la présentation, les cibles, cet alignement des cibles-là n'est pas revenu. Et c'est tout notre souhait, puisqu'il faudrait que les cibles de l'agenda 2060, de la deuxième phase, de la deuxième décennie de mise en œuvre de l'agenda 2063 soient véritablement alignées aux cibles régionales et nationales. L'autre préoccupation, enfin, Monsieur le Président, c'est sur est-ce que c'est une question, est-ce qu'il y a une stratégie de financement sous-jacente à la mise en œuvre de cette deuxième phase décennale-là, parce que la première phase, la première décennie aurait connu également des problèmes liés au financement. Comment est-ce que les États, comment est-ce que la CEA entend mettre en œuvre une stratégie de mobilisation visant à mettre ou visant à implémenter l'agenda 2063. Voilà en quelques mots nos préoccupations, Monsieur le Président. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much for some quite expansive comments. I hope we've taken note and can respond to these issues raised by Cameroon. DRC, please take the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, pour la parole que vous m'accordez. Et comme je prends la parole pour la première fois, après mes deux compatriotes qui ont plusieurs fois pris la parole, je voudrais remercier le peuple du Zimbabwe pour son hospitalité légendaire. Ce n'est plus une légende maintenant, mais c'est une réalité que nous vivons. Je voudrais également féliciter les organisateurs pour le caractère impeccable de ces assises. Et enfin, Monsieur le Président, laissez-moi vous dire que j'ai beaucoup apprécié votre manière de conduire les débats. Le sujet dont je voudrais vous parler a un caractère transversal. Et j'ai délibérément, à dessein, attendu que on ait entendu quelques orateurs avant de faire mon intervention. Au cours de cette conférence, au cours de ces assises, nous avons entendu plusieurs concepts auxquels nous n'étions pas habitués depuis plusieurs années. On a parlé de la transition énergétique, on a parlé de la taxe carbone, on a parlé de l'écotaxe, on a parlé de l'économie verte et même de l'économie bleue. Ces termes, ces notions, ces concepts aux yeux des Occidentaux sont devenus plus ou moins familiers. Mais en est-il de même sur notre continent africain? Rien n'est moins sûr. Et je voudrais justement, en prenant la parole, souligner le fait qu'il faut donner de l'importance à la sensibilisation de la population africaine sur ces notions, sur ces concepts. J'ai l'impression, moi, que la CEA n'accorde pas à cet aspect des choses l'importance qu'il mérite. Vous savez que si les gens ne comprennent pas, si la population ne comprend pas, surtout la population africaine qui est suffisamment, il y a une forte proportion de gens qui sont analphabètes, s'ils ne comprennent pas ce que signifie économie verte, économie bleue, transition énergétique, eh bien, ils ne pourront pas développer des outils de résilience face à ces phénomènes qui impactent surtout sur les jeunes et les femmes. On a beaucoup parlé des jeunes ici et des femmes. Donc, c'est important de sensibiliser la population sur ces concepts-là. Et si on ne le fait pas, tout ce qu'on va entreprendre va aboutir à des échecs. Donc j'insiste beaucoup pour qu'il y ait une sensibilisation des jeunes, une sensibilisation des femmes, des personnes en général, des Africains, pour qu'on puisse savoir c'est quoi ces phénomènes qui mettent en péril le devenir de l'Afrique. Je me réjouis, puisque nous parlons d'autres choses ici, on a beaucoup entendu parler d'intégration ici. Je me suis réjoui de ce que ma compatriote a parlé du barrage Grand Inga. Mais je voudrais la compléter parce que j'ai l'impression qu'elle n'avait pas souligné assez le caractère non seulement régional, je dirais même continental, pour ne pas dire planétaire, de ce projet. C'est vraiment le projet intégrateur par excellence. Parce que si Inga est terminé, si Inga est achevé, Monsieur le Président, vous avez dit tout à l'heure que vous avez entendu parler de ce projet depuis que vous étiez enfant. Maintenant, vous avez 65 ans, on en parle encore. C'est pour montrer l'importance de ce projet qui doit absolument se réaliser grâce à la coopération de tous nos amis africains. Parce que si Inga est exécuté, imaginez ce que cela aura comme impact au niveau régional, au niveau africain et au niveau planétaire. Il y a aussi un autre projet dont on ne parle pas assez. Toujours dans le cadre de l'intégration africaine, l'eau. L'eau. Il y a quelques années, quand le président Mobutu était encore en vie, il y avait un projet de verdir le désert du Sahara avec l'eau du fleuve Congo. Parce qu'à chaque seconde, ce sont des millions de mètres cubes d'eau qui sont déversés dans l'océan Atlantique, qui se perdent. Et il y avait un projet pour récupérer cette eau-là, la pomper vers la Libye. Ce projet n'a jamais vu le jour. Et nous ne savons pas pourquoi. Plus récemment, on a parlé du projet d'envoyer de l'eau vers le lac Tchad, toujours l'eau du fleuve Congo. Parce que le lac Tchad, vous le savez très bien, est en train de perdre chaque année son volume. Ce projet également est un projet intégrateur très important, mais qui, jusqu'à ce jour, n'a pas encore vu le jour. Et nous nous demandons bien pourquoi. Je crois que ces deux projets-là, s'ils sont réalisés, dans le cadre de l'intégration africaine, ce sera une grande réalisation. Je crois que voilà donc, Monsieur le Président, ce que j'avais brièvement à dire, et je vous remercie de m'avoir donné la parole.
Oui, Monsieur le Président, je vais compléter, c'est toujours la République démocratique du Congo. Mon intervention va se focaliser sur le capital humain. Je voudrais dire par là, merci pour m'avoir permis de prendre encore la parole. Monsieur le Président, l'Afrique doit s'investir dans le capital humain. C'est important, Monsieur le Président. L'investissement dans le capital humain est essentiel pour le développement économique de l'Afrique, ainsi que pour les capacités et la compétitivité industrielle. À cet effet, les secteurs publics devraient jouer un rôle important et primordial dans la mise à disposition d'un enseignement et de formation technique et professionnelle de base, et nous considérons que cet apport comme un investissement indispensable dans le secteur social qui est lié à l'atteinte des objectifs de développement durable dont fait partie le secteur social qui est lié à la réduction de la pauvreté. Mais pour cela, une attention particulière devrait être accordée autant à la qualité de la main-d'œuvre qu'à l'ampleur de la segmentation du marché du travail. Autre volet que je voudrais intervenir, c'est sur les inégalités sociales qui persistent en Afrique. En fait, les inégalités sociales indiquent une différence relative des situations entre individus, soit de la consommation du revenu, soit de l'accès à certains services sociaux de base, soit du genre. Et là, je m'allie à la source du programme des Nations Unies pour le développement 2014. À notre entendement, à nous, elle ne se focalise pas exclusivement sur les pauvres, contrairement à la pauvreté, mais sur l'ensemble de la population. À vrai dire, la typologie des inégalités sociales fait ressortir les inégalités de revenus, des inégalités de développement humain, des inégalités d'accès aux services sociaux de base et des inégalités du genre. C'est une enquête qui a été menée dans notre DSRP, République démocratique du Congo. Ainsi, pour pallier à différentes inégalités, la République démocratique du Congo a ratifié en 1985 la Convention sur l'élimination de toute forme de discrimination à l'égard de la femme. En 2006, la République démocratique du Congo a inscrit dans sa loi fondamentale l'égalité entre les hommes et les femmes. Qui dit genre, c'est gender, c'est hommes et femmes, l'équité et l'autonomisation des femmes, conformément à les articles 12, 13, 14 et 15 de la Constitution congolaise. Et enfin, la loi relative aux droits de la femme et de la parité homme-femme a été promulguée chez nous en RDC en 2015. Malgré ces avancées législatives importantes pour donner plus de droits et de place à la femme dans la vie politique, sociale, économique et culturelle, nous encourageons certains pays africains de ne pas laisser de côté la question liée aux genre, en particulier pour promouvoir l'émancipation de la femme. Mais j'ai une question importante avant de terminer. Je pose cette question aux gens qui ont développé sur comment appuyer la recherche en Afrique. Ma question est de savoir quels sont les indicateurs clés de la science et technologie, innovation qui ont guidé l'IDEP à élaborer le plan stratégique 2025-2019. Je dis et je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président. Telle a été ma contribution. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you to our colleagues from DRC for such elaborate issues you are raising. Thank you so much. I think we have noted that. On the Inga, I think we have discussed this before. I think we need, I don't know what to say. At times I tell it as it is, but I'm just saying, why from your perspective as DRC, why is the project not moving? What are the stumbling blocks? As a country, right, and we have ECA, can it help? Its convening power and everything? Can it assist? How do you bring in the ADB, etc., and all those issues? So for me, I think we need some concerted effort to focus on this project, and I hope Hannah and the team can move in that direction as we move, and it's something we can follow up during our 12 months chairmanship and discuss these issues. I've been asked to request participants that when they speak, they should remove their headsets so that there is no feedback or echo on the sound. Côte d'Ivoire.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président. Je souhaiterais intervenir sur le rapport de l'Institut africain de développement économique et planification. De premier abord, je remercie la directrice de l'IDEP pour sa présentation. Je profite pour la remercier une fois de plus pour avoir moi-même bénéficié d'une formation organisée en ligne par l'IDEP sur le thème « Améliorer les performances commerciales de l'Afrique vers une mise en œuvre efficace de la ZLECAf ». Formation que j'ai trouvée très instructive pour les apprenants. Pour revenir à l'objet de mon intervention, je vais dans le même sens que le Président concernant les cotisations. Il serait intéressant de présenter la distribution des bénéficiaires des formations de l'IDEP par pays. Cela permettra, dans un premier temps, d'avoir une vue globale des zones bénéficiant de ces formations, mais également de confronter ces chiffres avec la liste des membres qui ne sont pas à jour de leur cotisation. L'objectif ici sera de montrer aux membres non à jour qu'il est important de participer aux cotisations, vu qu'ils ont des ressortissants qui en bénéficient. Leur montrer leur intérêt pourrait les inciter à s'acquitter de leurs cotisations. Dans le cas échéant, accepter uniquement les candidats des pays à jour afin d'être équitable. Pour les pays à jour qui n'ont pas de candidats dans la distribution et qui ne sollicitent pas la formation, il serait judicieux aussi de les interpeller de l'opportunité de bénéficier de ces formations pour renforcer la capacité d'analyse de leurs ressources humaines. Je vous remercie.
We have Senegal.
Ok, merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais, à l'entame de mes propos, remercier le gouvernement du Zimbabwe pour son hospitalité et également féliciter la CIA pour la qualité de l'organisation. Je voudrais axer mon intervention sur la présentation de l'IDEP, la présentation de Mme Karima, la directrice de l'IDEP, que nous félicitons déjà pour la qualité de la présentation et insister également sur l'utilité, l'importance du travail que l'IDEP en tout cas effectue pour les pays africains, parce que nous savons bien que les pays africains ont un besoin important en matière de diffusion de la recherche et également en matière de renforcement de capacités. Et je pense que dans ces deux domaines, l'IDEP a en tout cas fait beaucoup pour les pays africains, des formations en présentiel, des formations en ligne, beaucoup plus depuis que la COVID-19 est là. Mais vraiment, c'est le lieu, en tout cas, de le remercier et de dire également que nous sommes, en tout cas, très satisfaits de l'accompagnement de l'IDEP. L'IDEP accompagne régulièrement les pays, particulièrement le Sénégal. Je pense qu'elle a souligné tout à l'heure quand elle parlait de l'accompagnement dans le cadre du PAP 2A, mais également nous bénéficions globalement de l'accompagnement du système des Nations Unies dans l'élaboration de nos plans nationaux de développement. Récemment, le PAP 3, qui est le 3e plan d'action prioritaire quinquennal, qui a été élaboré par le gouvernement du Sénégal, nous avons bénéficié d'un appui étroit également du programme des Nations Unies pour le développement. C'est toujours le système des Nations Unies. C'est l'occasion également de dire que le gouvernement attache en tout cas une importance particulière au soutien du système des Nations Unies au Sénégal. Et c'est pourquoi je pense que le Sénégal est en tout cas engagé à respecter tous ses engagements. Et d'ailleurs, la Cité des Nations Unies qui a été construite récemment à Diamniadio, qui regroupe les 34 agences du système des Nations Unies au Sénégal, témoigne en tout cas de la détermination du gouvernement du Sénégal à renforcer l'efficacité du système des Nations Unies au Sénégal et également pour tous les pays parce que c'est des bureaux nationaux mais également régionaux. Je tenais à le dire et puis vraiment à remercier encore une fois tout le système des Nations Unies. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Senegal. I'm happy you are benefiting from IDEP, and I hope you are paid up. Because if you are benefiting, then let's support our institution. And as I've committed Zimbabwe, we'll look at the numbers and see where we are, and we're committing to clear our areas and support IDEP. We have UN Women requesting the floor. After that, AFDB also requesting the floor, and Rwanda. So if you can have those three in that order. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I had two comments, and one of which was related to the budget, but the distinguished delegate of Ghana has addressed it eloquently, because I had the same concern on the amount of resources the ECA has allocated to gender, but also to issues of poverty reduction and social inclusion. So I will not repeat that. My second comment was to the presentation by Saxena, particularly on the issue of the recommendation for ECA to implement gender-responsive budgeting. And I wanted, through you, Mr. Chair, to inform the August House that UN Women has been implementing gender-responsive budgeting since the 90s. And we have learned many lessons throughout that process, one of which was, as we were implementing this tool of gender-responsive budgeting, we realized that the bulk of what we were doing was around a very little percentage of the resources availed to member states, because we're focusing on the domestic resources and not necessarily on the development aid. We then, with that lesson, we then moved on to implement a more broader aspect, looking at financing for gender equality and women's empowerment. But allow me, Mr. Chair, to indicate that we have had varying degrees of success across Africa, and to mention that we have had countries like Morocco that have become a center of excellence for this work on financing for gender equality, but also gender-responsive budgeting. They are a center of excellence not only for Africa, but for the whole world within UN Women. And I think they have been sharing their experiences across Africa, and many countries have benefited from their experiences. We have had other countries that have had mixed levels of success of implementing this tool: Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, Zimbabwe, and others. This said, I feel that there is a lot of work still to be done to look at what works and what doesn't work, because it's not one size fits all when you implement gender responsive budgeting. Going forward, our proposition as UN Women to ECA is as follows: that ECA, given their comparative advantage on research and analysis, they could help us, and maybe we can work together to review what we have done already and in the countries we have implemented gender responsive budgeting in Africa, and draw lessons on what works and what doesn't work. Again, realizing that one size doesn't fit all. Secondly, in countries where UN Women is already planning to start gender responsive budgeting, ECA could come in right at the beginning to help us to do a gendered review of the macroeconomic frameworks of those countries, and therefore identify entry points for implementing gender responsive budgeting, but also key stakeholders for engagement. And then we take it up as UN Women to implement going forward. So indeed, I see a partnership and collaboration between UN Women and ECA. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Can we have AFDB, please?
Thank you, Chairperson. I have two comments. First of all, I would like to thank the presenters for the excellent papers. The first comment is directed to the first presenter on the social sector, where there was mention of the return on investment in education. For me, this is very important, largely because all the programs that we have under Agenda 2063, their success hinges on human capital. And if we're not getting returns on investment in the sector, then we need to see how best we help. And given the capacity of ECA, perhaps what needs to be done is to identify the pockets of excellence on the continent, because we do have countries where perhaps the return on investment is high. And in my own country where I come from, I see that a lot has to do with governance. And in private institutions where parents are involved, or funders are very much involved in the governance of those institutions, the returns are quite high. So perhaps we could have a study that looks at the model in different countries and see how that can be replicated, because we cannot spend so much on education, because if you look at the budgets of most countries, in the education sector gets the lion's share, so we do need to get returns on that. And then my other comment on IDEP, I appreciate the work that is done, and I know they've trained quite a number of economists in particular in macro modeling, and now because we're focusing more on the continental free trade area, they've also trained trade analysts. So my question is, have IDEP considered partnering with the African Development Bank? We have the African Development Institute within the AFDB, but when I was just listening to the partnerships that they have, I didn't hear them mention the African Development Bank, whereas I feel with the resources within the bank, there can be a meaningful partnership. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think that's a fair point on collaboration with other training institutions or programs in Africa. There are so many institutions in Africa conducting effective training based on needs assessment. So I think it's a good proposal. Rwanda, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mine is actually a very small request. I just wanted, one of the presentation was mentioning some of the efforts that are being done to train young economist network. And my question was to understand if there is a follow-up to know how much actually of those young economists are actually integrated into their respective ministry and central bank and different private sector institution of their respective countries, so that they can actually contribute to the policy formulation of their country. Hopefully, those young economists which are trained are not recruited by UN organization, and they are going back to their country. So that is my humble question. Thank you.
Thank you, Rwanda. We have experienced that exodus to UN agencies, so I'm sure it's prevalent all over the continent. Any other contributions from the floor before we go? These are online, eh? Before we go online. Sorry. Reality of Aid Africa. Please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I wanted to also express an opinion on some of the presentations that were made, and really begin by aligning myself with a statement made by Ghana on the issue around the budget line, particularly with regard to elements covering poverty and inequality. Mr. Chair, you remember in the morning we were talking about the primacy of tackling poverty as a way of really making sure that we're in the right path and ensuring that we are addressing the right things. And I think also in the budgeting, it is important that we see that level of commitment. And I'm afraid that segment budget allocation is quite small to be effective in showing the level of commitment to focusing on poverty, even in the analysis context. The second point I wanted to make, Mr. Chairman, is while we welcome the inclusion of the African Union in the G20, we still feel that the proper institutions, the legitimate institutions for international financial architecture reforms lies with the United Nations. We do not believe that the G20 should form a policy-making or decision-making organ that should influence how the international financial reform should be taken. And in that regard, we hope that indeed the support that will be provided by the ECA is in the context of really urging the member states, the members of the G20 to revert back to this, the processes, procedures, and the forums created by the United Nations to address the important issue of the international financial reform. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, I didn't hear any comments how the ECA plans to prepare the continent on the forthcoming financial conference, Financing for Development conference that is scheduled to take place in 2025. Perhaps they would like to shed some light on that so that we know how member states will be engaging with that process going forward. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Could we have the Research Institute, Southern Connecticut State University? You're most welcome. Let's hear from you.
Can I start?
You can start.
Thank you for allowing me to give a little bit of my opinions or reasonable suggestions. I am originally from Ethiopia. I left Ethiopia at age 18 to go to school in the US. I have been back once in a while to Addis Ababa because that's my beloved city. Africa is close to my chest, but everything that I have written undergraduate, graduate, including on ECOWAS, all these years that I have been in the US. 2 or 3 times I have participated in ECA's conference. And we have written paper with 3 of us about women equality with men in terms of business ownership, which is already published. Now, this time, I am listening, not representing any country in the world. I'm simply enjoying the educational atmosphere that I get from this type of conference. 2 papers that I would not remember exactly which one is which. One is the very last one, which was on gender equality. It said by 2094, as Alfred Marshall used, not Alfred Marshall, John Maynard Keynes used to say, in the long run, we're all dead. Most of us, we may not see 2094 to see whether or not this gender equality will be actualized. When I left for the US, there were only 2 or 3 young ladies in my 11th grade class. The rest was boys, if I call them boys. In the US, when I finished my senior year, over 51% of the students in my classroom were women. That's a different reason, and I cannot compare the US women participation in any of the fields. Time might be on our women's side here in Africa. The question becomes, what can ECA do to see it can motivate families, regions, and so forth to enable women to go to school immediately when they're ready to go to school, even if publicly provided educational atmosphere. But that's one. I don't know whether or not we can actualize this. Let's not deceive ourselves, but we have to do the work that it takes to move forward for women equality. They have yet to go a long way based on current behaviors of us, the men. The other area that I want to discuss is when I wrote my dissertation, that was in 1989, 88. Gawan wrote also on ECOWAS, who was the signatory individual for the formations of ECOWAS. To this day, I have yet to know what exactly ECOWAS has achieved. In fact, recently, 2 of the members exited. The question becomes, why? The continent of Africa has been really dictated by military takeovers. Look what has happened to the Sudan. Look what has happened even in Ethiopia, my birthplace. Anytime there is less democratic systems of government, less stability, then the growth pattern, the improvement, the growth level will be compromised. What can ECA do? Unless you put aside the protocols that you are playing, it has to be done, it has to be done. Otherwise, we will repeat what this Tanzanian author said a while back, how Africa was underdeveloped by Europeans. That is not going to stop, whether we know it or not know it, directly or indirectly. It is time for you to move forward. I am 75. I don't know how many years I have left. I may not see 2094. I may not see when the monetary system has been implemented in the entire continent of Africa. Transportation, education matters. Institutions matter. In each country, there are weaknesses of institutions. I have seen it in Addis Ababa as recent as 3 months ago. As recent as few days ago when I got my visa. It's a laughing stock. There has got to be a forced institutional change, not military, but civilian leadership, democratically guided. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Yes, indeed, institutions matter. Now we have what I think will be the last contribution, but this is online. Mr. Ahmed Anafi from Egypt, the Minister of Planning. Are they ready for connection?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks for all the presentations and interventions done by the different member states. I'm just at one point, maybe, of course, we appreciate you as a chair, but I'm not sure, given the UN kind of setting of meetings, usually member states are given a priority to make the interventions. But anyhow, I stand to be guided by Your Excellency as per the rules of procedures of this meeting. Second, I just want to also say that we have been following closely the presentation by the Secretariat, especially on the program plan for 2025. And actually, one of them was one of the strategic directions was the one that integrate regional and sub-regional transboundary initiatives. We think that this is quite important to make this kind of mapping for the different regional and sub-regional transboundary initiatives. We as Egypt also, we have our own initiative, which was launched by the COP27 presidency, Decent Life for a Climate Resilient Africa. It's one of the initiatives that has been launched given the success of the national initiative that we have, Decent Life in Egypt, which is mainly focusing on the rural areas and these communities, which are usually the poorest and the most vulnerable. We think that there's a big opportunity. This is why we worked on this opportunity and we started to make this development on the ground. So our regional initiative is aiming to improve the quality of life in 30% of Africa's most vulnerable and villages across the continent. So we look forward maybe to ECA also to engage on this one and to see how we can push it further. Just one last comment. Also, we want to join Ghana on the same concern when it comes to the budget, especially on poverty eradication and also women empowerment. Maybe we would like to seek more clarification on the Secretariat on how they intend to also make sure that these two important aspects for Africa, they will also be well covered in the work program, given the budget allocation that is currently proposed for the budget. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't get your first intervention. Could you repeat the microphone? I couldn't, the earphones, I couldn't hear properly.
Okay, I'm not sure if it was the part, I mean, for me, it was just something regarding the order of the list of speakers. Usually member states are given a priority to deliver their interventions. But anyhow, of course, I stand to be guided by Your Excellency in this matter.
No, on that one, I'm guided that member states are given priority. But for these sessions, we were giving those who are here physically the opportunity to speak first, and then we would connect with those on the online platform. That's how we were operating. Thank you. Okay. I think now we need responses from above here. I'm not going to say who's going to start what, etc. Maybe we can go by the order of the presentations, and then we can adequately respond. Thank you. With Saxina.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll actually group everything that was said about my presentation and things related to gender, poverty, and inequality. Let me address first the question, the comment that was raised by UN Women. We are well aware that gender-responsive budgeting has been your area, and we were thinking of when it was assigned to us to actually collaborate with you and also with the IMF, because that also has started doing a lot of work there. So we will come to you, and I very welcome your 2 initiatives that you've given us to work on these papers, and also where you are starting new programs in countries for us to do a gendered review of macroeconomic frameworks. So I really welcome that, and we will definitely come back to you. In a similar vein, for my AFDB colleague, I just want to say that we would be happy to collaborate on a study to see where the returns to education are higher. We'll be in touch with you on that as well. Now, coming to a general question about poverty. Africa has 60% of the world's poor live in Africa. How do we tackle that? And I've thought a lot about this issue, and before coming to ECA, I used to work at ESCAP, which means the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. And I was very used to making presentations where I would say that during this entire period of the SDGs, and in the last decade and a half, 1 billion people have been pulled out of poverty, mainly from China and India. So there is something to be learned from that, and I think, Mr. Chair, you mentioned at the very beginning about what to learn from China. I'm just going to say one thing. Having seen my own country, I come from India, over the last 10 years, how it has progressed and how much poverty reduction has happened and how much progress has happened in the last 10 years. So one of the ways of thinking about poverty in general, in my opinion, is there is, I find the SDGs a really beautiful framework for countries to follow. Because if you look at the way the entire, the 17 goals are, poverty is number 1, okay, goal number 1. Goal number 2 is hunger. Goal number 3 is health. Goal number 4 is education. And that's how countries need to actually figure out how they work towards eliminating poverty. And poverty, I do not mean necessarily getting above $2.10 or whatever the poverty line is, because that's just poverty in terms of income. But we do have multidimensional poverty, where people have poor health, they don't have access to education, they don't have access to clean energy, they don't have access to water, clean water. So all these things are a part of eliminating poverty. So countries need to start building on that, providing social protection, okay, providing healthcare, because that's a very important aspect. Somebody who doesn't have wealth, I mean, I remember growing up, we were told when health is lost, a lot of is lost, So we need to ensure that we have social protection, because in Africa, I think my colleague sitting at the back might want to correct me, but only 17% of the population has at least one benefit on the social side. That needs to improve. So working towards that. Now coming to gender equality. I think my colleague will answer the question related to the budget, who presented the budget, but I wanted to actually talk about gender equality in general. Gender equality is not necessarily about spending more money. Gender equality a lot has to do with a lot of the institutional, legalistic barriers that prevent women from achieving their full potential. That does not require any money. So countries, and that's sort of some of the work that we want to pursue in order to see where exactly, and that's what I was saying when we said that we're in financial inclusion, one of the ways of empowering women, looking at structural barriers, legalistic barriers, what kind of barriers exist. Everything does not necessarily cost money. On top of that, this question raised about what to do. One of the other things I want to say that gender equality, I'm a strong believer that everything that the governments can do in order to advance on this SDGs will help in gender equality. So I'll give you, if you try to provide sanitation and all these kind of things, what would it happen? It would improve gender equality, because we all know from various studies that after a certain point if you do not have these kind of facilities, girls tend to drop out of school. So if you're working towards, providing sanitation facilities, that is gender equality. If you're providing universal health care for all, that is gender equality. If you're providing access to education to all, that is gender equality. So one has to think in a more holistic manner how to achieve that, and start working from goal 1. making your way up to goal 3, 4, gender equality is goal number 5. So thinking of this entire thing in a more holistic manner is the only way one can eliminate poverty and move towards some of the higher goals. That's what I want to say for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to react to some of the questions and comments. But before that, let me say that after my presentation, I have received messages from my staff, and actually they were more excited about your comments than my presentation. So I think that your comment summarized everything that I wanted to say. I wanted to thank all the delegates who have expressed satisfaction of the services that IDEP is providing to them, and with their support we'll continue doing so. Just maybe a few reactions to what has been said. En ce qui concerne le Bénin, vous avez parlé d'une étude sur les métiers du futur. Je pense que c'est effectivement quelque chose de très bon sur la base du travail qu'a fait le BIT il y a quelques années sur les métiers du futur. Je pense qu'on peut faire une contextualisation dans le cadre des différents axes dont nous faisons la promotion, comme l'économie verte, l'économie bleue, voir en quoi tout cela peut mener à des nouveaux métiers et des métiers qui peuvent être attrayants pour nos jeunes, parce que l'on s'est rendu compte qu'il existe des domaines qui n'attirent absolument pas. L'agriculture, par exemple, est perçue comme quelque chose de trop traditionnel et n'attire pas les jeunes. Or, il y a une nouvelle agriculture. Comment faire pour que ces nouveaux métiers puissent être développés dans un cadre africain? En ce qui concerne l'utilisation des anciens de l'IDEP, tout à fait, c'est une excellente suggestion et je vous remercie. Nous les utilisons dans nos cours, mais nous les utilisons également comme personnes ressources parce que nous avons une offre. Nos cours ne sont pas seulement des cours ouverts, nous avons aussi une offre standard pour les pays. Tout à l'heure, le délégué de la Gambie parlait de notre coopération avec la Gambie. C'est dans ce contexte-là qu'on travaille avec eux. Et effectivement, utiliser nos anciens étudiants est une excellente suggestion. Il y a une question, je pense, de la RDC sur le plan stratégique et la manière dont il a été conçu. Il a été conçu, j'ai expliqué, nous avons un conseil d'administration, nous avons un comité technique consultatif qui préside à l'orientation de nos travaux. Et une fois qu'ils ont travaillé, c'est quelque chose que nous présentons à la conférence des ministres. Donc, le plan stratégique que l'IDEP a mis en œuvre entre 2019 et 2023 est un plan stratégique qui a été soumis à l'appréciation de la conférence des ministres. Donc, cette instance qui a donné son avis et ses orientations, c'est de cette manière-là que nous avons interagi. Yes, UN Women, we are very much aware actually of the, as my colleague said, about the gender responsive budgeting. Actually, we have a number of courses relating to gender responsive policies, and there are modules and specific elements that relate to gender responsive budgeting, that relate to time use, etc. So it is something that we have been doing for a number of years now in collaboration with UN Women. We do it in Dakar, so maybe we can now see how we can expand it to the rest of the continent. And I fully agree with you about the role of Morocco actually in championing gender responsive budgeting. We have been using them in this regard. ADB partnership, of course, I mean, we are open to all sorts of partnership. We have had an excellent working session with ADB when ADB few years ago, I think 2 or 3 years ago, has reorganized its training offer, and we have received colleagues from ADB in our premises, and we discussed how we can cooperate. And let us wait for the outcome of all this and how you can tell us about potential partnership. Rwanda, for the Young Economists Network, definitely, I mean, we were discussing earlier return on investment in a number of areas. We have invested in the training of our youth, but 95% of them are still students. They are masters and PhD students who have been sponsored by their heads of labs, and we are following up with them. And earlier, when I presented IDEP, I mentioned the new support that we have received from the United Nations regular budget, and it is also meant to support the yen, and that's why I mentioned the macro modeling, Africa Macro Modeling Day. Actually, it is a day, it is not a training day, it is a day where we will be gathering to see where the needs are, what are the areas that we have a group of students who are interested in looking at social aspect. We have others working with the statistic sector. We have a group working on climate. And you know that we have already had a study about how to reach 10% growth in Africa. So there are a number of potential areas, and we will be following with them thanks to their, and whatever you have as idea and recommendation as you think priority areas for this kind of research would be welcome. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Just 3 issues that I wanted to just comment on very quickly. First, I want to really thank you for your commitment and leadership in leading by example on the areas to IDEP. Thanks a lot. And we hope you can champion that, across with, encouraging other countries to also follow suit. The 2 other issues that I wanted to refer to, one is the question on how do we eliminate poverty and reduce inequality. I wanted to remind all the delegates of the work that had been done last year for the Conference of Ministers, which actually particularly focused on this, in terms of what policies can we do. And some of what we had discussed included things like progressive taxation, looking into things like, land taxation, property taxation, how can we actually also increase the efficiency of targeting of social safety nets. So we had a lot of these discussions last year already, and we hope that these, can be some of the things that we build on going forward on how we can actually address the issue. And beyond just the issues of, income and distribution, there is also a very fundamental concept of equality of opportunity. At the end, it's not just about, the income level, but what determines at the end, the ability to have social mobility, to move up, is this equality of opportunity. And that encompasses so many issues, not just in terms of income and wealth, but goes beyond that, and it's an enabler. So that would be really important to keep in mind when we are addressing or trying to address these issues. The other one on gender inequality. I wanted to just mention that it's a very interlinked issue. Sweta already mentioned some of the things that actually have implication on the gender equality, but let me refer to one that is at the heart of what we are discussing in this year's Conference of Ministers, which is the issue of energy gap in Africa. There are documented studies that shows that actually addressing energy and access to electricity and so on in certain regions, certain towns and cities, actually basically enhances women labor participation. Because what it does when you have electricity, there are many things, many tasks that women had to do that are now more accessible with other means. So actually in addressing some of the key issues that we're discussing in this Conference of Ministers, we can actually get positive spillover to enhancing women labor force participation and tackling this issue of gender equality. Another issue is the need for more data that is related to gender. We have, particularly during COVID and even the year before, there has been a lot of tendency for policymakers and central banks to try to have measures that actually support more access to finance for women. Yet, we don't have the data to track the success because we don't have disaggregated data, for example, for credit by gender to actually measure how has this helped. So these are the type of things that we need to work on, the underlying data and statistics to support, to monitor, to measure, and to also work on other supporting issues like, for example, there are a number of countries that try to offer guarantees to support credit to women. Women tend to have very low non-performing loans in terms of whenever they borrow, they are more likely to actually repay. So there is evidence actually that for African countries that did these measures, that this has been successful. So sharing these type of experiences would be very important. And another, I think, important area that we can do more of is looking at success stories within Africa. And here I can, just out of my top of my head, mention 2 countries in Africa that made substantial progress in terms of gender equality, Rwanda and Tunisia. So part of what we can do also is to look on what have they tried to do, what worked, how they would have done it differently, and how this has been sustained. These are some of the things that I think we need to encourage more of the peer-to-peer learning across the board within the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, we have to be out of here by 6:15 for the interpreters. So I'll give the next responses 2-3 minutes each. Daya, Carlos, Said, and then we'll have the last word from my big brother, Pedro. Please, let's stick to that so that we are out of here on time.
Extremely quickly, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. There was nothing much, no many comments about the presentation I made, just maybe 2 indirect comments. The first one made by the distinguished delegate from Egypt and about the integration of transboundary initiatives. And we have taken note of potential initiatives that might be relevant to the program of work of ECA. And I would like to kindly invite the distinguished delegate of Egypt to provide us with further information through the Secretariat, and the relevant program will take over from there and further exchange, and perhaps within the framework of the upcoming Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development. The second indirect comment is perhaps the one made by the distinguished delegate from DRC. C'est au sujet du commentaire que vous avez fait concernant l'importance qu'il faut accorder aux ressources en eau et l'importance de conscientiser les populations sur certains concepts comme celui de l'économie bleue. Je voulais juste confirmer qu'au niveau de la CEA, nous couvrons largement les ressources en eau à travers le concept de l'économie bleue, puisque pour nous, la définition ne se limite pas seulement aux océans et aux mers, mais englobe également les rivières, les lacs et réserves en eau souterraine. Et donc, il y a déjà eu plusieurs activités en cours concernant donc justement les ressources en eau et le sous-programme qui s'en occupe, ainsi que le bureau régional pour l'Afrique de l'Est, pourra vous donner plus d'informations à ce sujet. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, the question related to gender has been elaborated on several times by my colleagues. However, additional piece of information that I could provide that gender equality comes under the Gender, Poverty and Social Policy Division. This division has a budget of 5.01 million, of which 1.24 million that is specific to gender equality. As gender within ECA, within the program, is a cross-cutting team across all the disciplines. All sub-programs have embedded gender in their respective work plans. Hence, gender will receive the adequate attention it requires. Nevertheless, we agree that more XP funds could benefit gender equality and poverty reduction. We take note, as my colleagues mentioned, about the gender responsive budgeting. So this is well noted, and SWETA is going to be following up with UN Women on this. Now, in relation to information related to the budget, the document E/ECA/COE/42/INF have been shared with the participants. This document has the full explanation about the budget, what it entails, to what purpose it would serve, and the source of the RB budget is through the member state contributions. In relation to the clarity of forecasting on XB funding, as we know, XB funding is contingent on successful resource mobilization. So it is not straightforward. However, we are in the process of concluding several agreements, and I'm going to list a few of them only. One is 20 million euro to support decarbonization, decarbonized, inclusive, and transformative value chains for energy transition minerals in the SADC region. 1 million for debt restructuring support, 750,000 on data, on science, 500,000 on technology / digital, 200,000 euro on blue economy, 3.5 million on AFC FTA, 5 million on support to the AISCC member states on managing climate risk and bolsters resilience. So this is in a nutshell. So we have a forecast, but it was difficult for us to give a figure if we don't have signed agreements yet. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and thanks, distinguished delegates that raised questions and comments. The first question is from Benin. how is ECA supporting the domestication of Agenda 2063, national development plans. I think my colleague, Bat, did speak to this earlier on. We're using the integrated planning and reporting tool, which is called IPRT, to domesticate Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030 in national development plans. And like he said, we've supported over 30 countries on the continent, and the requests are still coming in terms of countries that want to be supported. And this afternoon, I think earlier on, Egypt also made a request that they would like to be supported. So that's the tool that we are using. We're also having conversations with the African Union in adopting that tool to support all AU member states. We hope by the time that's done, we'll be able to do this within the ambit of the African Union. The question of Cameroon on Africa's natural capital account being factored into the credit rating system, I think that will be quite useful. And I think as we also factor in natural capital accounts into the rebasing of the GDP, it will also assist a lot in terms of credit rating. But more fundamentally, the heads of state and government of the African Union, they've decided that Africa should have its own credit rating facility, and Africa should be able to rate its own countries rather than others rating it. It's a work in progress, and the ECA is supporting that. The same also by the delegate of Cameroon. Why didn't we talk about the cost of funding the second 10-year implementation plan? And also, is there an underlying strategy for the funding of the second 10-year implementation plan? We deliberately omitted that. Auda NEPAD, that has responsibility for this, they will be speaking to you tomorrow morning. They will be making a presentation tomorrow morning and focused on the funding of the second 10-year implementation plan. And they will also be speaking to you on the strategy being put in place. They are working on what is called the African Development Fund, which will be a fund that will support the implementation of the second 10-year implementation plan. They will also speak to you on the funding PIDA 2, phase 2 of the PIDA project. So let's wait till tomorrow morning and listen to Auda NEPAD, because they are the action owners on funding the second 10-year implementation plan. They've been given that responsibility by the African Union. So we need to wait to listen to them. Financing for Development Conference of 2025, we omitted this. I'll ask my colleague, Adam, who has responsibility for that, to speak to it. And finally, my final comment, although I do not work for ECOWAS, but I listened to the penultimate comment by one of the speakers, one of the respondents about ECOWAS. What has ECOWAS achieved? My sense will be that we should not throw away the child with the bathwater. There may be challenges today, but ECOWAS has achieved a lot. ECOWAS free movement policy has really promoted substantially intra-regional trade in West Africa. Secondly, ECOWAS has been very instrumental in promoting peace, security, and stability in the region. Don't forget, Liberia was in crisis. Sierra Leone was in crisis. There was also a time in which Côte d'Ivoire also had its own challenges. ECOWAS was there for all those countries, and ECOWAS helped to achieve stability in those countries. So I think as we critique these institutions, we should also try and do it in a balanced way. Progress has been made. There are challenges, but there are also opportunities ahead. Thank you.
Okay.
Adam, do you want
okay. Yeah, okay, with your permission, Mr. Chair, very briefly, regarding the question related to the fourth International Conference on Financing Development. This is a very timely question. The fourth International Conference on Financing for Development is scheduled to take place around August 2025 in Spain. And in preparation for that conference, the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs will be organizing a meeting in Addis Ababa this year. between June, August, to review progress since the third International Conference on Financing for Development that was held in Addis Ababa in 2015. And all regional economic commissions have been requested to organize regional consultations on financing for development in preparation for the fourth international conference. Here in ECA, we would like to, together with African Union and other partners, organize consultations to develop a kind of common African position on all aspects of financing for development that will inform negotiations at the global level in 2025. So we would like to have the contributions and preparation of all member states who will be requested to participate in these consultations. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. I think we have to give our Deputy ES the last words, but we have to get out. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. First, on financing for development, indeed, we've been in contact with the government of Ethiopia to support the preparation of the forthcoming meeting in Addis Ababa. And the outcomes of this meeting, our Conference of Ministers of Finance, are equally important in shaping the content for that meeting. Now, thank you very much for the comments that you provided on our sub-programs, on our program, on the budgets and so on, especially the call that you made about the importance that you've identified in the work on poverty and women empowerment and gender equality. Just to say that the Executive Secretary of ECA has equally identified this as a priority, and the relevant efforts will be made with a view to strengthening our work in this area, strengthening the analytics so that we provide more evidence-based analysis on these issues, in addition to, of course, allocating resources accordingly. So it is an important agenda. But as my colleague said before me, this is an interlinked issue, and we can address it from the different other areas of work in which we are active. Our work, for example, in ensuring financial inclusion through digital transformation, which is a work for which we've now established a dedicated division on technology, innovation, and connectivity, will support the achievement of greater gender equality and women empowerment. So there are many pathways to achieving that, but your point has been made quite clearly. Now, on the sources of financing, as Carlos, my colleague Carlos, indicated, we derive this from different sources. First, the contributions from our member states, the assessed contributions, and these consultations involve your representatives in New York, the Fifth Committee, the ACBQ, that will engage into interrogating our 2025 budget. In addition to that, we have the extra budgetary resources. To ensure that we have stable extra budgetary resources, we formulated a midterm business plan that covers 3 or 4 years, and in which we've identified some of the strategic areas where we need to develop integrated projects. For example, one of the integrated projects is on de-risking investments in Africa. And this, for example, addresses the question that was raised earlier by the Honorable Delegate of Rwanda, which is about how to make the most of our resources. The de-risking project has, among other things, a series of analytics, for example, including the need for us to undertake growth diagnostic studies so that we know exactly what is it that differentiates one country from another. To do something which we call GIS enabled hotspot analysis. Where should we target our investments so that we don't have roads to nowhere, so that all investments in infrastructure generate the more development outcomes as possible. So this is part of the package of those integrated projects that we'll be engaging with our member states with a view to securing resources accordingly. For example, on the entire work on climate action, we, together with the African Union and with the African Development Bank, we have what we call Climate for Development program. It's about $200 million, which are going to go out there to secure resources. So there are many other there. And in this, all of this work, these projects, certainly the work on ensuring women empowerment, gender equality are part and parcel of the objectives. What we need to do internally, and we've started that exercise, is to try to do, of course, more with less. We're living in an environment where most of our organizations are facing liquidity challenges, which require that we try and generate more integrated work. Internally, meaning to make the most of all of the different pieces of work that we do. I mean, there was a point earlier that we need to go from single projects to much more transformational projects. We are doing that effort internally at the level of ECA to integrate our work together so that we generate the scale and the impact that is required. So that the work that is done, for example, in sub-regional offices, link better with the work that is done at the headquarters. A point made by Cameroon, which I touched, which is important, had already been touched by our colleague from the Office for Central Africa. Jean-Luc, in his remarks, had mentioned that we are working with the Congo Basin Commission to develop those carbon credit markets, and we also mentioned that in the case of Cameroon, we had done work on environmental statistics as part of the effort, indeed, to valorize the ecological service associated with our natural capital, a point again that I think DRC had mentioned earlier. Now, on DRC, raising awareness about all of these concepts is important. Our communications and knowledge management work includes that effort, that importance of engaging with many stakeholders across the continent with a view to explaining what all of these concepts are so that we have greater ownership. It's key for us to have success. So the chair is looking at me impatiently, so I'm asked to conclude my intervention here. Daya made reference to an important point, which is the blue economy. And the honorable delegate of DRC made reference to these grandiose projects in the past to try and utilize the water from the Congo Basin to, among other things, ensure that we have a very living Lake Chad, transporting water to Libya and other places. This is, of course, needs to be done with science as a foundation to make the right kinds of decisions so that we do not create imbalances, the water cycle. But it's part of the initiatives that may be required in the future, but it needs to be very well designed so that we do not create other environmental and negative impacts. So, but it's part of our work moving forward. I guess, Mr. Chair, I think that's on the work about domesticating the Agenda 2063. Within the United Nations, we are equally looking at how to utilize the structures, infrastructure that our UN counter teams have on the ground to be able to support the implementation of Agenda 2063. As you know, our member states enter in what we call the cooperation frameworks with our UN counter teams that capture the priorities of the member states. It's important that the alignment that we are asking for between national development plans and Agenda 2063 are equally then transferred into that cooperation framework so that now our UN counter teams can support that exercise. So it is a multi-partner effort, including the UN counter teams. And as part of our overall AU-UN collaboration, our Secretary General and the chairperson are looking at how to strengthen this vertical integration, including at the country level. So to say that it is part of our priorities, and we'll be looking and working together with our other partners with a view to making this, a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. What we can do, given the importance of his responses, we can give him 15 minutes tomorrow, 9 a.m. Give you a slot for 15 minutes so that you go through everything. I know it's very important for you to be able to do that.
Thank you for your generosity, Chair.
Okay.
We will oblige.
Okay. We are closing now. I hear there are some notices from the Secretariat. Please, quickly, the interpreters are tired.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, to announce that the morning shuttles to come here are at 7:45, 8 o'clock, and 8:15. There are no shuttle buses coming here from your hotels after 8:15. So please catch one of the three. And for return to your hotels, the buses are parked by the gate, and each bus is marked by the respective hotels. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you so much for a very productive day. We continue tomorrow. We start at 9, and Pedro will give him 15 minutes, then we go into our program. Thank you and good night.
we're delighted that now we finally have the seat for the African Union at the G20, and this is very important because it moves us from being rule takers to rule makers, and leveraging that will be key. But also we need to make sure that Africa is sufficiently represented in terms of voice and quotas in different institutions, including, for example, in the upcoming IMF quota reform, to make sure that Africa has higher shares, which enable higher access to resources and a higher voice or more say in terms of decisions that are taken by these institutions.
Bienvenue, Salibonani, Mangwanani. Very warm welcome to unique and beautiful Victoria Falls.
We treat this as a core country of the continent because of your resilience and the Pan-African spirit.
The primary objective of this conference is to promote the economic and social development of our member states, to foster intra-regional integration and promote international cooperation for Africa's development.
Since our last conference of ministers, the world has fallen deeper into economic fragility, climate change, conflict, and distrust.